Hello and welcome back to Karma Stories. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have a 3-hour compilation of malicious compliance stories for you. This is a whole bunch of previous episodes from the channel that we've put together in one place so that you don't need to change your episode and can go about what you're doing over the course of your day. Whether you're working or driving or just doing things around your house, this is 3 hours of malicious compliance to help you get through your day. Alright, on to the stories, let's jump right in. In this story, a fed-up parent gives his daughter a simple ultimatum, and she follows it to the letter. Kind of. This story comes to us from Secret Albatross. Husband told adult daughter to wash her dishes or else. Our adult daughter, 22, lives at home, and it has been an ongoing battle to get her to wash her own dishes. Yesterday, her father had had enough and gave her an ultimatum. She was to wash the dishes that she had used by the time he got home from work, or he was going to throw them out. Daughter said, challenge accepted. Just before he got home from work, she washed the dishes that she wanted to keep. Her coffee cup, a special teacup, a few other things that only she used, and left the normal plates and bowls that everyone tended to use. Hubby got home from work. I pointed out to him what she had done. I was laughing the whole time. Yes, it annoys me when she doesn't do her dishes. She is a grown woman working full-time, living at home, and can't be bothered doing her own dishes. She complied in her own way, knowing full well he would not throw out any dishes that we all used, as it would affect everyone. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Fry1Fatmanic. It says, he should have said throw her out. Another commenter called Divine in Us said, instead of throwing the dishes out, maybe put them in a bag and put it on her bed. Switch off the Wi-Fi password till she complies. Yes, she is 22, but if she chooses to behave like a child, then she should be treated like one. Instead of laughing, I would have asked her why she thinks anyone else should wash her dishes. Why such disrespect towards her own family? There's a few different ways you could deal with this one, but the first one that pops into my mind is telling her she can't use any of your stuff anymore, that she has to go out and get her own stuff if she's not going to wash your stuff. She's 22, she's an adult, and she's living at home where she's using your stuff. She should know by this age that all of that stuff needs to be cleaned, especially since it doesn't belong to her. It is the family's dishes. You mentioned her actions were cute and clever. I don't think they're either. I think they're disrespectful. Now let's head over to a workplace where a new rule caused a bit more backlash than management expected, and the team found a perfectly salty way to push back. This story comes to us from Online Seller 8183, a story about chips. A long time ago, I worked weekends in a warehouse that received chips in bulk. Think like one truck shows up all one flavor, where workers loaded up other trucks with the orders going to individual stores. So think of pallets of chips in boxes stacked 30 feet up and trucks and docks being loaded up with a mix of chips of all flavors going out to convenience stores and grocery stores. Our job as pickers is to push around a large cart and pick boxes of chips of all flavors as we go around the warehouse. Then we load our order into the truck and go to the next order, and so on. When we dropped a box and a bag burst open, well, we would eat it. There would always be at least a couple open bags we could munch on at the warehouse. I only worked weekends. During the week, a lot of things would happen, and I would only find out about the changes the next weekend. One weekend I showed up, and we are not allowed to eat chips anymore. Apparently, a new manager was hired, and he was on a power trip, and told the guys, the next person I see eating our chips will be fired for theft of company property. This seemed to me to be a little ridiculous, as they would also make us compact hundreds of cases of chips when they came to be too close to their expiry date, like less than 6 weeks. There was a lot of waste, so for them to get on our case about eating a measly bag of chips was a little infuriating. Anyway, I don't need to tell you that the guys were pissed about this, and morale was low that weekend. Next weekend I come back in, the guys let me know that the manager is in a super bad mood. The workers devised a plan to get back at the manager. They would buy chips from our main competitor brand and eat that competitor's brand of chips as they worked. They argued to management that since it was from another brand, they could not get in trouble for theft, as it was 100% certain the chips had been purchased with their own money. Now, the management of the warehouse was appalled by the fact that we were all munching on the competition's goods, but there was nothing they could do about it. It took a few weeks for this situation to get resolved, but the way they fixed it in the end is that the managers would put a sticker on some bags for us to eat. In the end, we would be allowed to munch on the company products once the bags had been approved to be eaten by management. So then, it was not considered theft anymore, and we were able to resume eating from the company stock. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Studio Droid. It says, I live near a chip supplier warehouse. The local homeless are tuned into the schedule for when they toss expired product in the dumpster. They have a special clean dumpster that is used for expired product, and they never have to pay for it to be emptied out. Another commenter down below called Abbreviations OK178 said, I work inventory control at a fairly large distribution center, so I follow a bit of what's going on here. First off, I absolutely detest people eating in the warehouse. Selectors routinely find ways to accidentally damage product, so they can eat it on the sly. Nobody is informed about the damaged product, so that item eventually lines out, and stores that don't receive one have to be credited back. They leave their food waste trash hidden in spots around the warehouse that promotes rodent and fly infestation, not something you want to deal with on a large scale. I'm also in charge of dealing with the short-dated product that is too close to the expiration date to sell, and I have no problem giving the ones we're legally allowed to the employees to take home or eat on lunch. It's absolutely absurd to me how many people in this thread are completely on board with eating in a warehouse environment. You are making life for the people in positions similar to mine absolute misery. Okay, I can agree with the not actually eating in the warehouse part because, yeah, that could cause some problems, especially with infestations of things that you really don't want in a place that has food. So, break rooms, take them home with you, whatever. They can still take the expired product, but just get it off the warehouse floor. A fun one with this is when my wife and I used to run a convenience store, one of the many jobs that I've done in my past, our chip guys would come in to restock the shelves and pull anything expired, and they'd bring it up to the counter and ask us if we wanted any of it before they left the store. All of that stuff just gets written off anyway, and it would get tossed if they took it back. I can't tell you how many bags of chips I ate when we had that store. It's probably why I gained a whole bunch of weight while we were there. Alright, let's switch gears for a quick one because sometimes malicious compliance starts young. This story comes to us from Dismal Class 9894. Don't you dare put that in your mouth. Not the standard malicious compliance story, but I think it definitely applies. When my sister and I were much younger, we lived in this nice house in the southeast United States. We would go out to play in the driveway. This driveway was lined with railroad ties, and beyond those, a thick layer of monkey grass. At the time, the monkey grass was covered in the little black berries. As soon as my sister, about 4 to 5 at that time, saw them, she was fascinated. She ran over, stripped a handful off the stem, and went to put them in her mouth. Our father quickly yelled, "Don't you dare put those in your mouth, young lady!" My sister stopped her movement, stared down at the berries in her hand, and back at our father. You could see the wheels turning, her hand opening, dropping all but one berry. That single berry was pinched between her fingers. She smiled broadly as she shoved the hard black berry as far as she could up her nose. It was a stunningly long few seconds before she realized her mistake. The smile morphed into a scream, and my father quickly ran over to see if he could remove the berry. He could not, and so we got to take a trip to the family doctor. A short time later, with a lot of tears and a long set of tweezers, the berry was removed from the screaming kiddo. She learned a valuable lesson that day. Although malicious compliance may feel good in the moment, sometimes you pay for it. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called CoderJoe1 who is totally after my heart. It says, does she remember this, or did she bury it deep in her memories? Another commenter called Whip Snappy said, I snuck raisins up my nose as a kid, and my mom took me to the doctor. She was pissed later that she paid the doctor to shove black pepper in my nose to make me sneeze them out. I can't imagine if you live in the US and you have a child who habitually shoves things up their nose. Those visits to the ER would get very expensive after a while. There is something though called the mother's kiss, where they literally put their mouth over the kid's mouth, plug one of the nostrils, and give a little blow, not even hard, just like a little bit of a cough type force, and it should push the item out of the other nostril. I am not a medical doctor, this is not medical advice, but it's in a lot of the comments underneath this story. Next up, we've got a workplace power struggle where the wrong person got put in charge, and it didn't take long for everything to fall apart. This story comes to us from A Romantic Demise. Employees should listen to your friend instead of the boss? Okay. This wasn't my malicious compliance, but my friend who I work with. We'll call her Amy. Relevant information, we work at a large grocery store, and Amy is a team lead. Team leads are often asked to go to different departments and help out. However, because our department is usually incredibly busy, it can't be left completely without a guide. Because of this, every day, my department has one of the regular employees designated as an acting team lead for when the team lead needs to leave or get busy. Our department manager, Taylor, has a bad habit of playing favorites with some of the employees she's friends with. This includes ignoring when they break the rules, giving them more flexibility with the schedule and time off, etc. She also tends to try to replace the scheduled acting team lead with one of her friends, often putting Mark in charge instead. Yesterday, Amy came into work and asked one of the employees, Sarah, to do something for her. Sarah said yes and started the task. After a few minutes, Mark came up to her and asked her to do something else. Sarah told him that she couldn't because she was already doing what Amy had asked her to do. He left, and she figured that was that. An hour or so later, both Amy and Sarah get pulled into Taylor's office to talk. Taylor told Sarah that she should have listened to Mark because he was the acting team lead. Amy pointed out that he was not the acting team lead on the schedule, and Taylor told her that she had told Mark he could be the acting team lead. Taylor doubled down and said that Sarah should have listened to him instead of finishing what Amy had asked her to do. Amy was understandably irritated by this, so she decided that since Mark was apparently in charge over her, she would leave him to it. She took Sarah with her and went to help the produce department, who had been requesting help, instead of going back to our department. On a normal day, this may have been fine. However, it was a Saturday, and we are always insanely busy on the weekends. It took all of 30 minutes before the department had crazy high customer wait times, and things were falling apart. I had just clocked out and was talking to Amy before I left when the following exchange happened. Taylor radioed Amy to ask her why there were such high wait times in the department. Without missing a beat, Amy answered to her, "I don't know, I'm not back there, but Mark is, he should know." Suddenly, Mark wasn't in charge of the department, and Taylor told Amy that she needed her to get back there to run things. Amy told her that she'd be right back there, then promptly told me that she'd be finishing stocking the cart she had before she went back, which was not even halfway done. I laughed and went home. I can only imagine that the department was in chaos, given how it usually is on the weekends, and it reflects very poorly on Taylor when we have high wait times. I guess the actual team lead should have been in charge after all. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Underground Avenue. It says, Management 101. If they give stupid orders, follow them exactly. Just make sure you have documentation or witnesses when things blow up. Crappy bosses never own up to their mistakes and will try to throw you under the bus. Of course, exceptions apply for dangerous activities. Another commenter down below called Gemini27 said, it's never a problem for managers until suddenly they have skin in the game. Always know what reflects poorly on your boss or F's with their bonuses and how you and your colleagues can affect that. I think this one could have been taken a little bit further when Amy radioed back to Taylor. She should have actually mentioned, Mark is in charge. You know, like you told me he was. You should ask him. Because if that radio is being listened to by everybody else in the store, including all the other department managers and possibly even the person who owns or runs the store altogether, that would come down on Taylor. She made her bed, then she gotta sleep in it. Finally, we've got a story from someone who's been around the block more than a few times, and when the crew wants to do things their way, he lets them, and lets the lesson speak for itself. This story comes to us from Acceptable Promise 9. Okay, boss, we can try it their way. Let me say up front, I loved my job in the barge towing industry. After 50 years in the business, I've done it all, and I've done all of it in almost every way possible. I know how long it takes to build a tow, to connect the barges together after clearing them out of the fleet moorings, but more importantly, I know the easiest and quickest way. Our story begins on a nice hot summer day. We had 3 barges to clear out for a refinery run to pick up product. I explained to the crew where our barges were in the fleet moorings, and laid out my plan for how we, or rather I, would get them out to build the tow. Simple enough, right? I've done it dozens of times before. But it was hot, and I kept getting feedback from one of the hands about how his way would take way less time. I knew better, shut him down, and we did it my way. It took about 90 minutes, and we were on our way. I heard some grumbling from the crew about me being a hard butt and not being open to new or better ideas. I've heard that before, and I forgot about it just as fast. 2 weeks later, after returning to work, I got called into HR. Well, what we had for HR at the time. I was told I was being inflexible and not open to new and better ways of doing things. I was encouraged to listen to the crew. Maybe I could learn some new and improved ways to towboat. The day arrives. Same orders, same 3 barges to put together for a refinery run, same deck crew. So I figured, let's try some of that HR advice. I asked the crew, how do you guys want to do this? I told them where the barges were and asked them which one we should clear out first and where they wanted to build the tow. 90 minutes in, we had cleared exactly 1 barge. Temps were in the high 90s. One of the quiet hands said over the radio, "It didn't take this long last week." I responded, "Someone went to the office and said I was taking too long and wouldn't listen to better ideas. Got any more?" Then I added, "Let's take 10 for a water break and get back to it after." After the break, the crew came up and admitted their way was taking longer. They asked if we could just get it over with and do it your way. I asked just to be sure. I didn't do anything to disrupt your plan or make it harder, right? I don't want to get called into the office again next week for not giving you guys a chance. It took another 60 minutes to finish and get underway. I told the crew to cool off and that we'd have a meeting about what happened. I explained that if they wanted, we could have a little informal meeting before every job to discuss what I was planning and give them a chance to offer input before we started. They thought that was a great idea, until they realized that was a form of work. The meetings slowly faded away. A few years after that incident, one of the alphabet agencies that regulate us and tell us how to do our jobs made those meetings mandatory, and now they require paper forms filled out in duplicate. I retired 3 years ago. I miss the work and many of the people I worked with. It's a great career for the right person, someone willing to watch, learn, and not be home for long stretches of time. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Lilac Crazy. It says, "I've seen stories from Barge OPs several times over the years, and I'm always impressed that every single one seems to love their job. Wish I looked into something like that back in my working days." So it's obvious in this story that OP knew the better way to do things there, but the new people that are there need to feel like they are heard. So those meetings that happen beforehand, they can be really good for the morale of the other people if they feel like their ideas are being heard, even if they're not being put into use. But also, sometimes letting people try it their own way is the best way to show them why your way works. And if nothing else, it keeps things running smoother in the long run. This story comes to us from Ars Torok. "You are salaried, right? Just stay up for this meeting." Before we begin, dear readers, a brief bit of backstory. I have found that every company has a Todd. You will know who your Todd is. because he is who you call when you don't know who to call, when the unthinkable happens and everything is on fire and there is no hope of salvation. Todd steps in to fix it. Todd spends his entire time just fixing the unfixable. He has been with the company since the dawn of time, knows the true names of several demons, and was in the room when the old magic was written. Our Todd has an elite team to be on call when stuff breaks. Each team member is the highest authority in the company for one specific thing or another. They are the elite. Their word is law, and to question them is to question Todd. Our story begins shortly after I had accomplished the greatest goal and become the newest member of Todd's team. Now, my company works with point of sale. We sell computers, software, printers, card readers, and pretty much anything you need to take money from someone else. After years working in the call center, I proved myself worthy of Todd's attention. I interviewed, tested, and became the specialist of third-party integration. My focus is the connection between our product and whatever weird stuff your company wants to use. Examples of this include getting smart lights to change on command from ordering kiosks, letting the staff control the new jukebox you bought with their employee ID cards, or getting the sales data for the day to report to your Canadian counterparts in both French and English, but only if someone buys the poutine sauce surprise that day, and other fun conundrums that only the client can fathom. It is important to note that during my time in the call center, I was paid hourly. As a specialist, I would be made a salaried employee and would be on call. After accepting the position, I was told that I would have a trial period of 1 month to prove myself. I would remain hourly, but would have a pay increase to more closely match my expected rate as a salaried employee. I would have the title change and new responsibilities of my job. But I had this month to prove I was worth the extra money. This first day of my new job, we get a call from one of our more needy clients. They lay out a series of demands. 1. All of their stores must be upgraded to Windows 10. 2. As each store makes about $10,000 a day, taking them down for a remodel is not acceptable. 3. All of these upgrades must be done overnight while the store is closed. 4. If the upgrade fails, the store must be rolled back that night so they can open in the morning. 5. The window of time to do one of these upgrades is 8 hours. 6. The fastest they have been able to do one is 10 hours. All of this means one thing. They need a specialist to do the upgrades, one that knows their integration. I give Todd the "put me in coach" nod, and a deal is struck. Todd is about to leave on vacation, which leaves me under the control of Steve, the director of the support center, who used to be my boss before I worked for Todd. I am now on overnights. 4 nights a week I upgrade these stores. I supervise 2 to 3 technicians who are on site in separate stores. I do all the software, they do the hardware. This process is staggered based on time zones, so I generally am pulling 12-hour shifts. The overtime is amazing, especially paired with the raise I got. Fast forward a week or two, the initial batch does not go the best. I have a 40% failure rate. This is due to scripts provided to both the client and me by the various third-party companies used by the stores, including their music, food delivery, and credit card processors. Everyone on their side knows who is the bad guy here. Talks are in place and we are moving forward. A meeting between the client and us is scheduled near the end of the week, right in the middle of my off time. As I said, I am working 12 hours a day. I live a full hour from work, and for security reasons, can't do these upgrades outside the office. I have 10 hours to eat, sleep, get up, and eat again before work. Once I get to work, there are no breaks on the upgrade train, no lunch, no stopping. So I get home around 11 a.m. each day. The meeting is set for 4 p.m. I can't get any reasonable sleep before the meeting or after. Steve demands that I be there to account for my failures. I already have another specialist designated as my proxy for these sort of meetings, because sleep is a thing. I also explain that I am still hourly, but he won't hear it. He insists that I need to be there to explain why the project is going so poorly, and that my explanation better not be just throwing other people under the bus. He tries to explain that I am salaried and therefore need to be there when the company needs me, especially when I am the one who is screwing up. Again, I tried to remind him of my probationary period, but he won't listen. And there, my friends, begins the malicious compliance. I clock in at 10 p.m. the day before the meeting. I do my upgrades, all 3 of which are successes, due to what I assume is a change in the third-party backend. The scripts I am provided with work perfectly this time, and all goes well. The corporate contact I report to in the morning tells me the meeting is just to go over the new changes to procedure we went through that night, and I will get the Cliffs Notes in my email. No need to attend the meeting. I thank them and sign out. Then I sit. For 6 hours, I twiddle my thumbs, take a lunch break and a car nap, and wait for the meeting. When it's time, I walk upstairs to the top floor and the conference room, where everyone but Steve is shocked to see me. I calmly take my place and wait for the meeting to start, stating that I was asked to be here. The meeting lasts 30 minutes and consists of the new procedure, praise for my diligence, and a quick overview of how the timetable will change because of the past failures. It is noted that my performance has prevented a lot of the sites from failing when they would have otherwise, and the client is pleased with my work. Steve, who had previously blamed me for the failures, sheepishly agrees that I was a good fit for the project. Then the meeting ends with the best part. The person giving the talk states that she knows I am asleep right now, so she will go over the changes with me personally when I get in tonight. Meanwhile, the guy I asked to sit in on the meeting for me will work with them to set up the changes to be deployed, about 3 hours of work, so that it's all ready when I get in at 10. The meeting ends. Steve makes a comment about the changes being done by someone with more experience, and hints that it should be my responsibility. I cheerfully say that rather than waste my coworkers' time, I will just do the changes myself. I have my 3rd or 4th win by now, and am ready to go. At the end of day 2, I have spent 36 hours at work. Caffeine is my only salvation, and we are almost done. Near the end, I am basically waiting for a technician at my last store to finish testing. So I tell him to call me and shut my eyes for about half an hour just to rest a bit. All is well. I get called, everything is green, the vigil is over. 2 of my friends insist on driving me home, where I promptly passed out into the most heavenly sleep I have had in ages. I wake up to an email asking me to head into work for a meeting with HR. It is my day off, so I'm kind of perplexed. I head on in and apologize for being fashionably late. The meeting is with the head of HR, who has a report that I was sleeping on the job. There is camera footage of my 30-minute power nap. I calmly explain that Steve had asked me to show up to the meeting, and then asked me to stay later to set up the changes, and by the time I took my nap, during what I called my paid 30-minute break, I had been in the building for 35 hours. I politely remind the HR head that I am on my trial period and will be expecting overtime pay for that time. It came out to about 33 hours and change, due to my extended lunch break. Todd returned from his vacation and tore Steve a new definition of duties. From then on, he would not be given control over Todd's team when he was away, and we would report directly to the CEO. The project completed without much incident, and I passed my probation with flying colors. OP added a quick edit down at the bottom. It says, edit, a bit more info since people are asking. Steve would later be fired several months later due to a similar situation where he threw someone so hard under the bus that everyone stopped and saw how uncool that was. He was replaced with new Steve, who is a superior Steve in every way. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called This Is My Phone Though. It says, getting called in on your off day because some effing busybody spotted you napping on the job but failed to realize you'd been at work for 36 hours is an absolute effing nightmare. Steve only got in trouble because his brand of miserable wasn't the right brand of miserable. Another commenter called Uncle Reddit said, yep, sometimes you just have to suck it up and play the game until things fall into place. Good for you for keeping your composure and sticking with it. Some people really do try to break you, but when you outlast them and get paid for it, that right there is the win. I just hope that if OP's in a place like where I am, that they actually charge them the hours for the HR meeting as well. Because in Ontario, Canada, if you get called in, that's a minimum 3 hours pay. Alright, let's switch gears a bit. We're heading to the poolside for a late night splash of petty revenge. All thanks to a little disagreement over underwear. This story comes to us from NightSkater97. So I wore the wrong type of underwear in the pool. I, 24 male, hosted a friend from college, also 24 male, that I haven't seen since before the pandemic. Shortly after he arrives, we head to a local bar and grill in our neighborhood. We decided to do the 15 to 20 minute walk instead of drive, so we didn't have to worry about leaving the car. I was joined by my roommate, 25 male and also a good friend, and his new-ish girlfriend, 22 female, who I don't know that well, but I have always had friendly encounters with when we have hung out. At the bar, drinks flowed freely, and my friend seemed to really hit it off with our crew. We stayed longer than expected, and it was fully dark, and we were well buzzed by the time we decided to walk home. It was still hot outside when we got to the apartment complex, so my roommate suggested that we hit the community pool. The pool and hot tub were technically closed for the night, but it isn't too close to any of the units, and generally no one cares if you are responsible and don't break bottles or anything like that. After debating whether to head back to our place to change first, my roommate insisted that we're all friends here and that we could just go in the pool in our underwear. Everyone agreed on this, although my roommate's girlfriend announced, "You guys have fun with that," and proceeded to lounge next to the pool on one of the deck chairs and scroll Instagram. We strip down and hop in the pool and are having a pretty good time just messing around. After some time had passed, my roommate was chatting with his girlfriend and then quietly approached me afterwards. Apparently, his girlfriend was very uncomfortable with me wearing just briefs in the pool. Both my roommate and my friend were wearing boxer briefs, and she wanted me to go all the way back to the apartment and change into a swimsuit. I initially protested and said it was his idea in the first place and how everyone was in their underwear and none of us cared. And what's the difference? It's not like my underwear was white or see-through or anything like that. My roommate asked me to go change for him as a favor so that it didn't turn into an issue between him and her. I was pissed, but I decided to let it go for the time being. When I got back to the apartment, an idea popped into my head when it occurred to me that I still had a swimsuit from when I used to swim on the club team in college. So I put on my Speedo and head back out armed with another six-pack for the boys in only a t-shirt, towel wrapped around my waist, and flip-flops. I get back to the pool, announce that I had changed into my swimsuit as requested, drop the towel and ditch the t-shirt, and launch into a wicked cannonball into the pool. I can see a wry smile on my roommate's face, but nothing else was said about my choice of attire. We go on in the pool, and a few minutes later, she announces that she's tired and is going to bed. We stay out late, including more beers and laughs in the hot tub, while the girlfriend was asleep at our place. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Unicorn187. It says, "I'm confused as to why briefs are worse than boxer briefs. They are just shorter in the legs. That's like the only difference. Unless they were like 2 sizes too small or something, it wouldn't have made a difference." Another commenter down below called MyGloby1 said, "As a female myself, I don't get what made her uncomfortable. Unless of course she was secretly attracted to OP and couldn't help looking at him in his briefs. She got up and left when he put a Speedo on because that was just too much. Of course, this is all opinion. Having 90% male friends and having seen most of them at one point in time in their undies, only 1 or 2 made me uncomfortable, and was 100% because I was attracted to them." Yeah, honestly, briefs versus boxer briefs, we're talking about a few inches of fabric here. It's not like he showed up in a thong. I've seen women's swimsuits that cover way less than OP was covering. Maybe she just wasn't ready to admit she noticed. Alright, let's take a quick break, and then I've got a story about a customer who asked for everything on his burger and got exactly that. This episode is sponsored by my 3D printing website. Visit dangly3d.com, where you can get your hands on your very own Carmen Chameleon, Karma Stories channel mascot. He's so cute, and he comes with a cookie. Because cookies are awesome, and he might just share with you if you subscribe to the channel and drop a like on the video. Carmen is available in over 20 colors on the site. Visit now at dangly3d.com. Now back to our stories. This story comes to us from Classiest Robin. "I'll take an everything burger." My first job was waitressing at a 50s diner style burger joint. I think I was about 16. It was a sweet gig. My coworkers were generally nice and the customers were a mixed bag. Though we did have one homeless guy that would come in and do our food challenge weekly for a free meal. He was cool. Anyways, to the story at hand, I had a family come in. If I remember correctly, it was the traditional dad, mom, 2 kids. It was lunch rush, and basically all the tables and the bar were filled. So I'm taking their order, and their dad asks for a burger. What would you like on that burger? Everything. Well, we have a lot of options. I gesture to the menu selection containing the topping choices. The dad does a once-over, clearly not long enough to read, looks back at me and states, everything. At this point, I should note we had a bunch of choices. Looking at the restaurant's menu, they currently have mustard, onions, slaw, chili, mayo, ketchup, lettuce, tomatoes, pickles, grilled jalapenos, grilled mushrooms, grilled onions, and grilled bell peppers. I feel like there was even more choices when I worked there. This place also had 4 to 5 cheese options. I asked the dad a few more times if he's sure, even tried to list the toppings. His wife even tried to explain the situation. I could tell he was getting agitated, but I also knew he didn't know what everything meant. Eventually, I take his word for it and attempt to get the rest of the order. Do you want cheese? I said everything. Well, we have 4 everything. Yikes. I want to point out he's literally yelling here. Well, I finished taking the table's order. On the ticket, I remember specifically taking the time to meticulously write out every ingredient as clearly as I could. The tickets were small, and each ingredient was denoted by an acronym, so it was a challenge to fit everything. I also made sure to include every possible cheese. I knew this monstrosity was going to be sent back. I knew it was an abomination, but I was determined to give that man what he asked for. The line cooks looked at me like, "You sure?" With a simple nod, I pulled the trigger. I walked that burger out to the man with the biggest crap-eating grin. It had to have been 2 pounds of sloppy, wet burger. The annoyance on his face would have been reward enough, but as predicted, the father called my manager over and complained. The manager came to me fuming, clearly had been chewed out by the man. You know you have to ask the customers what they want on their burgers? I did. Well, the man at table 11 says he didn't ask for that. Mind you, I was still 16 at this point and timid. Still, I explained the situation. My manager's demeanor changed, and he had a little smirk on his face. My manager asked me to follow him back to the table, and grabbed a menu on the way. "Hi sir, I need some clarity. What exactly did you ask for on your burger?" Everything, but..." My manager opened the menu on the table, pointing to the topping options. "Sir, this is everything. This is what's on your burger. I'll be happy to remake the burger to your specifications, if you can give them this time. But we are very busy and it could take a while. OP, please take his order." So I did. I can't remember his actual order anymore, but it was definitely a more traditional burger. Probably took about 10 minutes to come out, so his family was mostly done with their meal while he was beginning. We could have taken another burger off the line to make his, but why make a chill table wait? Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Karaoke Queen. It says, "I don't even understand why he complained. If I ordered a burger with everything and received a burger with literally everything, I would be totally thrilled. Finally, somebody who understands the meaning of everything." Look, if you're going to be vague and bark orders, don't get mad when someone takes you literally. That's not miscommunication, that's just consequences. Alright, last one for today, and this one moves fast. A gas station cashier gets pushed too far, and the woman demanding special treatment ends up getting exactly what she earned. This story comes to us from Fickle Midnight 5907. Lady demands that I stop what I'm doing and open my register. Okay, no problem. I, male 19, work as a cashier in a gas station in Miami Gardens, Florida. Naturally, the people that come into the store tend to be on the crazier side. The store had a line of maybe 7 people. Now, at this point, I had the register closed sign up and I was stocking the vaporizers and accessories on the shelves behind the counter. My coworker was handling the customers in line. I turn when I hear the door opening. Another lady walks in without a mask on. I politely ask, "Excuse me, miss, do you have a mask that you could put on?" She scoffed at me and rolled her eyes as she dug in her purse for a minute or two. Finally, she pulls out a ratty little mask with only one functional strap and holds it to her face while she's waiting in the line. Well, apparently she couldn't do that for very long. She comes to the front of the line, ranting and raving about how the line is too long and that we shouldn't be keeping a valued regular customer waiting. I've been working here for 4 months and I've never seen her. I'm fairly confident I know all the regulars. I tell her that there are other things that my manager left for me to do before the end of closing and that I have to get them done. She didn't seem to like that at all. "I demand that you open your register right now." "Okay, you got it, lady." I move the sign and then I turn back to her. "Do me a favor and stand a little bit to your right." Surprisingly, she complied, albeit with her arms crossed, and what I can only assume was an angry gaze firing through her mask. Cue the malicious compliance. "Next customer," I yell out into the store. It dawns on her what I'm doing, but the next customer shoots up in front of the counter before she can even fully process it. I go about this transaction as normal, despite the fact that this lady is yelling at me at the top of her lungs, no longer holding the mask to her face, mind you. I finish up with the other customer, and I turn to her. She tries to yell over me, so I raise my voice a bit and try to be as stern as possible. I tell her, just because my register is open now doesn't entitle you to skip all the other people in this line, who also have lives and jobs and other responsibilities. Get to the back of the line and be respectful, or I have no choice but to have you removed from the store. We don't have security, but we're 2 blocks away from a police station, and one of the officers who comes into the store gave me their personal number to use just in case we have any issues. The lady harumphs loudly and walks dejectedly to the spot in the line she had before she left. In the amount of time it took for the rest of the story to occur, more people had gotten in the line. I said back of the line, I told her pointedly. She dropped her shoulders and walked to the back like a toddler. People, man. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Alfonsky. It says, "We have 3 registers where I work, and the dumbest thing I see people do is wait at an empty register instead of queuing up behind people." Yeah, I think every store's got that one person who thinks standing at an empty register makes them next. Back when my wife and I owned our convenience store, I had people ask me to open a second register while I was the only person in the building. Like, what did they think I was gonna do? Clone myself? I do love this story though. Sometimes you really do have to give people exactly what they ask for, and it's really satisfying. This story comes to us from Superb Raccoon. "These are the new metrics? Okay, everyone is fired." So I work at a large company, Fortune 50 company, but like everywhere, management comes up with one-size-fits-none metrics. The latest was revealed to us by our manager, who surprisingly is the hero of this story. It has always been the metric that if you fell below 70% of your quota on a quota-eligible role, you risk being put on a performance review plan. It is also well known that anyone getting on a performance review plan is pretty much toast. Either you get fired for failing the performance review plan, or you are first on the next layoff list. And usually, they replace you with a newbie fresh out of college in one of the lower 2 bands. My particular team is made up of all senior people. Every one of us is in one of the top 2 skill grades. So we know we are a target, which is insane, as all of us engage the C-suite at other very large Fortune 500 companies and act as trusted advisors. We cannot be replaced by a new grad with intern-level performance. So our intrepid hero, my boss, is pulled into a 2-day seminar about 2 months ago that goes all the way to the General Manager of Sales, Americas. Several senior HR managers are there too. It is a rare in-person meeting, so people are cautious, but at least they know it's not a massive layoff kind of deal, as the first day is about the path forward and how important our division is to the company strategy. They go on about how our division is the front line of expanding sales in our partner program, to take it from 60% of revenue to 85% of revenue, with 75% of new growth expected to come from the partner channels. The company Absolute is relying on our division and our skilled staff to deliver on that goal. The second day is different, however. In the afternoon, they lay out the new plan for technical sellers, 80% attainment per year and backdating 2 years. It is a rare in-person meeting, so people are cautious, but my manager goes into, I am just asking questions mode. So let me understand, if last year they hit 100% attainment and 75% of the team did, but the previous year they hit 79%, then they are on a performance review plan? HR hems and haws. Well, yes, that is how it would work. I see, and there are no exceptions? The GM speaks up. That's correct. Everyone must be a top performer. No exceptions. My manager starts gathering his things up. Would you mind if I skip the rest of the day? I have a lot of work to do, apparently. The GM looks at him. Well, no, we have more to cover. What is so urgent? He looks at the GM and maliciously complies with the stated metrics. Based on the metrics and the no exceptions rule, I have to prepare performance review plans for my entire team. No exceptions. I will need to start the open headcount to hire replacements for everyone too. The GM looks confused, attempting to digest this new information. Most of the rest of the managers stick their hands up. We need to go too. We need to write up performance review plans for all our people too, and submit open headcounts. A quick count shows that 80% of our division would be on a performance review plan. Given the failure rate, that means about 70% of the team will be fired, 10% will be laid off, and 20% will remain. For the growth strategy of the company, the tip of the spear in partner sales. My boss points out that retention of personnel and reduced turnover is part of the roll-up objectives, as well as attainment of his reports. That means he will be performance review planned, as will his manager and her manager, all the way up the chain. No exceptions. The meeting wraps up after the discussion dies down, and the GM says they are not implementing this now, but in a few months. In those 2 months, there are more online meetings, questions asked, more data pulled from the HR systems, meetings with HR and legal, who is now very interested in this plan of theirs, culminating in a meeting this last Monday where the revised plan is revealed. A new exceptions plan has been put in place at the insistence of the legal department. Gone is the informal, put together a package to be evaluated for an optional exception for your employee. Now, there is a set of formal exceptions that cover a number of categories. Legal ones, like taking family leave or medical short-term disability in the last 3, and functional ones, like having been moved between departments or job titles, or having a non-quota designation in the last 2 years. If the quota plan changed significantly or had a metric with no previous history to set the target, there is 10 or 12 categories depending on if you count the overlaps. An exception resets the timer to the next calendar year. So if someone qualifies in January, they are off the hook until next January. Turns out everyone in the division now qualifies for one or more of those exceptions. Imagine that. Epilogue. Turns out HR did not do an analysis of how many people would be impacted in our division, as the numbers were done worldwide, over 100,000 employees with quota, not by department. Their number said 11% of us would end up on performance review plans. Let's not get into how they're trying to reduce headcount by driving people into leaving or retiring early. Also, when legal found out they were backdating the requirement, they went ballistic. Legal also went spare when they saw no exceptions for federally protected leave like family or medical disability. Gotta love my boss, he looks out for us, often by maliciously complying with stupid requirements. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Really Can't Not. It says, yeah, when legal pokes their head in and says, what you doing? Things have gone awry. Another commenter down below called Grumbly Old Man said, coming up with new standards and new KPIs? Sure, whatever. But it should be illegal to backdate new requirements to a period before they existed. Trying to hold people accountable to a standard that didn't exist when the work was being done is just stupid. Yeah, once legal starts poking around, I think the fun is officially over. That's the moment that leadership realizes, oh wait, what I'm doing has consequences. It is wild how out of touch some of these execs can be with the actual day-to-day reality of the teams they rely on. This was a kind of rare story though, where the manager actually took one for the team and made sure that they weren't all going to be penalized because of a stupid rule coming in. Speaking of bizarre rules, this next one takes us to a place where petty bureaucracy meets downright strange company policies, and let's just say, things are about to get a little greasy. This story comes to us from ManyMud8194, McDonald. I was working at a McDonald's in France 14 years ago. They made me feel constantly harassed by all their rules, but the thing is, they wouldn't even follow them themselves. Every 30 minutes, you were required to clean your hands. Everyone had to do it. It was posted right on the walls. Even the managers were supposed to comply. But the managers, they never did it. So I'd stand right in front of their office and ask, "When are you going to clean your hands?" And as long as they didn't do it, I wouldn't work. I told them I wasn't going to touch anything in a dirty environment, especially when the rule clearly applied to everyone, including them. They started losing their minds because I did this with everything. Cheese left out longer than allowed, straight in the trash. They tried to dig it back out themselves. Same with salad, same with anything. One time, the freezer malfunctioned and wasn't freezing anymore. The temperature was in the positives. So I took the whole pack of meat, probably 200 or 300 patties, and dumped it straight into the big outdoor trash bin. And yep, they went to retrieve it. That day, I told them to either send me home, or I'd sit in the corner doing nothing. I refused to cook that meat and risk making someone seriously sick. I know I might have been overreacting, but honestly, they deserved every bit of it. In the end, the owner practically begged me to leave, but I didn't. I waited until I found a better job first. In France, it's expensive to fire someone without a legitimate reason, and I was just following their own rules. It was them who didn't want to follow them, just because they thought they were too strict. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user who is appropriately named Choice Food. Why didn't you report them to the health inspector? They would have shut the place down. Another commenter down below called Onyx7900 said, I worked at a McDonald's in the US back in 2013, my first official job. We had the same issues. The managers would get so mad when I'd wash my hands or start rotating things out. They could never write me up because I was literally following their training guides, but they really acted like the food waste and the cost of keeping things clean was coming directly out of their pockets. OP responded to this and said, yeah, because they got bonuses based on that. The boss, not the owner, was actually voted every year as the top manager in the province for having the least food waste, and he got a nice bonus for it. To be fair, he was pretty honest about that part. Honestly, the health inspector showing up would have been game over for that place, and it's wild how common this kind of thing is, even in different countries. Some managers act like hygiene is a personal insult, or it's a personal insult just to get them off of their chair in the manager's office. I think when it comes to the health of the people you are serving versus the bonuses of your boss, the health of the people you're serving wins out every single time. OP, you did a great job in using the company's standards to make your boss's life miserable. Well done. Alright, this next one is short, sweet, and painfully relatable for anyone who's ever had a boss who just insists they're always right, even when they're very, very wrong. This story comes to us from TippyTina62. Turn in all receipts. In a previous job, we had two methods of purchasing, a credit card or a program called SAP. For credit card purchases, you had to turn in receipts once a month with a reconciled expense report. For the SAP program, you turned in receipts as received to be filed by our secretary. I worked a 7 days on, 7 days off schedule, and on returning to work, I was admonished by my boss for not turning in receipts as soon as I received them. I reminded boss that I only make credit card purchases and those receipts get turned in monthly, not immediately. My boss told me I was wrong. We always turned in receipts immediately. Okay, whatever. I kept doing what I knew to be right. We had this discussion at least 3 times over the course of 6 weeks. I even asked a coworker at one point, and he agreed that I am right and boss is wrong. So I started making a copy of receipts when I got them and turned in the originals. Because the secretary worked at different locations, I rarely saw her. But when she got the first receipt, she put a note on it telling me you should not turn this in, it goes on an expense report. I left a note for her explaining boss's insistence that I turn in receipts immediately. Apparently, the secretary has stroke, I do not. The next week when I came into work, my boss explained to me that I do not need to turn in receipts immediately, I saved them for the expense report. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Beaker90. It says, when your boss explained to you that the receipts get turned in with the expense report, did you say, yes, I know? OP responded and said, I explained to him that the receipts get turned in with the expense report. He told me no. I asked when the policy changed. He said it's always been like he is advising me. When we had the final discussion, the one where he told me to stop turning in my credit card receipts immediately, I reminded him that I had told him this at least 3 times. Oh, he must not have understood me. Another commenter down below called Coolest Cat said, you have now found the real boss. She controls the flow of work. I can't tell you how many times I've befriended the receptionist or secretary in an office setting that got things done that I needed to complete a project that had fell on deaf ears of management. Chocolates, yes, I'm that old, were a surefire bribe. OP responded here and said, dang, betcha. Although I had occasional problems with the secretary as well, she could be just as stubborn as the boss. Ah yes, that moment when someone finally repeats back your own words to you like it's a revelation. Kinda painful, but there really is nothing like a boss explaining the thing you already told them multiple times and making it sound like it was their idea. Also, just a quick shout out to all the office secretaries of the world who really do run these big businesses. You guys are awesome. Keep doing what you do. Alright, so we've dealt with bad metrics, greasy managers, and receipt confusion, but now it's time for one of my favorite kinds of compliance, the dress code takedown. This next story is what happens when a manager tries to weaponize something as petty as pants color, and ends up getting absolutely outstyled. This story comes to us from Tap Your Ride and is titled Black Pants. I was a pharmacist at a Safeway in Arizona, and my boss was a malignant narcissist like textbook case. I enjoyed talking to customers and answering questions, which she hated as it was something she couldn't control. She was a fanatic about small things, like putting covers over the computer keyboards every night when closing. Pharmacist positions in that town were scarce, and I couldn't afford to quit, so I obeyed her weird directives and didn't say anything. When the regional manager came to town, they'd go out for lunch for hours and gossip. I grew tired of her intense and constant supervision, but there wasn't much I can do. She was desperate to find something about my work she could criticize. One day, I arrived to my shift and she looked at me closely, then announced that my pants weren't black enough and proceeded to write me up. The dress code was black pants or skirt, black shoes, and white coat. I went out after work and bought a couple pairs of black Dickies work pants, about 3 sizes too big, and a chain belt from Hot Topic, as well as some goth jewelry, lots of skulls and stuff. Also some Doc Martens, effectively becoming a goth girl in my mid-40s. I figured out the makeup with the help of a neighbor's kid. Next shift, I showed up and she was speechless, but there wasn't a darn thing she could do. Nothing in the dress code said I couldn't wear that. The RM showed up and they took a really long lunch, but couldn't figure out a way to write me up again. What really got to her was when a secret shopper showed up and I helped him with some over-the-counter items, and subsequently was awarded a Smile Award. I did make him laugh when I explained how to take Metamucil powder more easily. I got a free donut and a cup of coffee, while she was sent to Smile School because of her dour manner. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Pink Fat Rat. It says, I'll bite, how do you take Metamucil easier? OP responded and said, stir the powder into half a glass of water or less, drink it, and then chase it with a full glass of plain water. That way, you don't have to drink 8 ounces of gritty stuff. Another commenter down below called Bread and Fire said, Smile School? Now that sounds dark. OP responded and said, the corporate world is really weird. I didn't ask what happens at Smile School, but I'm sure she didn't like it one bit. Okay, Smile School? That sounds like the kind of place where you leave smiling, but only because HR says you have to. It's like corporate punishment wrapped up in a motivational poster. This story comes to us from BlueBoy714. Stripped of manager position? Okay, I can do that. This happened decades ago, but after reading another Malicious Compliance, I figured I'd post this. I was a manager of a programming department. I initially had 5 programmers reporting to me, and I was able to spend half of my time programming and half managing. I had always gotten exceeds or far exceeds expectations on my annual reviews. About 10 years later, my team had 25 people, and I was spending less and less time programming. Fast forward a few years, and I missed 2 months during the year for a surgery and hospital stay. And in my annual review, my boss, who knew nothing about programming, told me I was not doing a good job, and the programming department was missing deliverable dates, probably because I was in the hospital. They wanted me to go back to just programming, and I was stripped of my manager and only focus on programming. I was pissed off, but I told them that I can do that. I told my former staff what had happened and told them to direct all questions to my boss, who knew zero about programming. He was overwhelmed, and soon, senior management figured out that my boss was the problem, not me. They canned him and replaced him with the VP of programming in the UK. I am in the US. She was great since she started as a programmer and was an excellent boss in general. Since I was just a programmer now, all of the managers were in the UK, and I told my former staff to direct all questions to their new bosses in the UK. Since there was a 6-hour time difference and we only overlapped 2 or 3 hours each day, that made getting questions answered in a timely fashion quite difficult. In the meantime, my health wasn't the best, and my doctor told me I should go to a 4-day, 32-hour work week so my health wouldn't continue to suffer. Since my employer was a strict 40-hour-a-week company, I looked for another job and got 8 job offers in about a month. I was ready to resign. Finally, after a few months, my new boss asked me to be a manager again because of the time difference between US and UK, and because I had the most experience as a programmer in the company. Instead, I gave her my resignation and explained why. She asked me what it would take to get me to stay, and I told her I wanted a 10% raise and wanted to work a 4-day, 32-hour work week. I gave her 24 hours to respond. She spoke to the higher-ups and finally came back the next day and agreed. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called LonelyCoconut9734. It says, impressed that the company had people smart enough to realize that a mistake had been made, and they worked to resolve it. OP, it sounds to me like you sold yourself short in this situation because I think this would have been a 25% raise situation, even though you wanted to work less time. You were the person with all the experience. You were the person they needed in that spot. You could have asked for a lot more money. Sure, 10% is good, but I would have started much higher and maybe then agreed on something smaller, like 20%. Coming up next, one decision from a fresh-faced MBA nearly derails an entire rail project, and the cost? Let's just say it's not pocket change. This story comes to us from BillIM201. Don't want to pay 4 guys to not work for 6 hours? Okay, you can pay 30 guys to not work for 6 hours. To make an already long story as short as possible, some background. I am a manager for a North American railroad, and a lot of our work involves different crafts of employees. Different crafts have different unions and different work rules. The managers of the other crafts and I work together well to get done what we need to get done, especially when some of the work needs to get done at night. The track guys can have a crew assigned to night, while the signal guys can't. Even better, the signal guys who work overnight have to be let go after 12 hours. And if it's now their regular shift because they came in last night, they get paid the rest of the day to go home and sleep. Tack guys have all 3 shifts, but we only have a day shift and an evening shift, but no night shift, because the big hats don't want to hire enough people to do it. Now, the company has decided that paying guys to go home 2 hours early on a Thursday, come in and work overtime all night at 10 p.m., and go home at 10 a.m., getting another 4 hours pay to go home and sleep, is the ending of all that is good and pure in the universe, and will eventually lead to the collapse of capitalism, the nation, and indeed the universe itself. So they decide that the second shift guys have to stay 4 extra hours and the first shift guys have to come in 4 hours early. I point out that 1. I can't force employees to work overtime unless it's an emergency, and the union isn't likely to agree that we want to do this at night so we don't affect traffic is an emergency. 2. Not all employees are qualified on the same things. 3. Since they took half of my trucks away 5 years ago because savings, I don't have enough vehicles for an entire second crew to show up at 2 a.m. and relieve the guys working in the field so they can go home. The guys currently working will have to stop work, pack up the tools, drive back to the office, let the smaller relief crew load up, drive back out to the worksite, do the starting paperwork and briefings, and begin the work. And most importantly, 4, that while we aren't there, the track guys can't work because we have to keep taking things off of the rail so that the track guys can do their work, and then put them back when the guys are done so we can run the trains in the morning. All of it falls on deaf ears because the freckle-faced college kid who opens every conversation with, "I have an MBA, darn it," who has somehow gotten to a position where he's in charge of the estimates, wants to complain about those 24 hours a night. So, after having gone on the meeting record for all of it, I get out of the kid's way. I decide that if my boss isn't going to have my back, I'm not going to stop this inevitable disaster. After all, I've only been doing this for 27 years, but he graduated with a 3.6 GPA from the University of Texas at El Paso, so he must know better. So, the first night, the job grinds to a halt like clockwork at 1 a.m. The second crew shows up at about 4:15, and they get to work. The track folks pack it in because by the time anything gets dismantled, there won't be enough time to get anything done and put it all back together to start moving trains by 7. Second night, the shift change was a little smoother, so they got out of there at 3:45, managed to get a little work done before packing up. Third and fourth night, it rained really hard, so the drive back to the shop and out to the job site took extra time. No work done after the new crew showed up at 4:30. Bright and early Monday morning, we show up at our morning meeting to find that the track guys got about 30% of the work done that they'd planned for the week, and at this pace would finish a 6-week job more than 15 weeks behind, and over budget by more than 300%. Mr. MBA proceeds to launch into his carefully rehearsed speech about key metrics, percent spend versus percent complete, and all sorts of other nonsense. He then decides to start in on me. Since I obviously conspired and colluded with my employees to egregiously erode progress for an entire week. I held up the meeting minutes from the previous week. I told him in no uncertain terms that he had asked, in fact demanded, that we had a full shift change in the middle of the track department's work. I looked across the table at him and asked him if he wanted to revise that position. Completely unwilling to let this lowly engineer tell him what to do, he said no, and I was supposed to somehow magically make the shift change faster. Next 3 weeks were the same story. They've now been out there for a month and have managed to accomplish just shy of a week and a half of work. Mr. MBA shows up on the site one night just in time to watch my night guys walk off, watch the track guys shut down the machines, and gather outside to smoke, hang out, and generally carouse because they now know they have 3 hours to screw off and be paid for it. My guys had called me when Mr. MBA showed up, so I get out of bed and get to the job site just in time to see this guy in his shiny, fresh from the package safety gear screaming at the top of his lungs to the guys to get back in their equipment and get the naughty word back to work. They all refuse because they all know that they can't work without us there. Not that they care all that much about our equipment, but because they know Mr. MBA has been throwing a little too much weight around, and nothing makes union employees stick together better or faster than putting the screws to a manager who really needs it. I walk up during a profanity-laced tirade and cut right in and say, "Well, Mr. MBA, I'm sure you're not suggesting that these qualified employees violate Rule XX, which clearly states that they shall not, under any circumstances, run that equipment through a switch that the signal department hasn't checked. Would you? That would be a serious violation, and could get him a 30-day suspension without pay. And if you were to suggest that he do that, you wouldn't have a union card in your pocket, and he would have 30 witnesses that saw you give him that directive. So you wouldn't be suggesting that, would you?" He turned 3 shades of purple, stomped back to his little white company sedan, and drove away. He held on to his asinine mid-shift shift change for another 2 weeks until he couldn't hide the massive production delays from his boss anymore. And suddenly, he wasn't in charge of the estimates anymore. The total cost of his little venture? Just over $940,000 over the course of 6 weeks. But he did manage to save $700 a night on those off hours that he didn't have to pay for. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Cool Beans Chili. It says, whenever he tries to give you an order, just ask him, "Oh, so you want me to waste another $1 million?" Opie responded and said, for some reason, he doesn't work in our department anymore. For the life of me, I can't imagine why. Does anybody else think that the requirement for an MBA should include having a tattoo on their arm that says, make sure you know how stuff works and why it works before you make any changes? Seriously though, an MBA can be good for some people and it definitely looks good on a resume, but for a lot of those people, MBA stands for Master of BS and Arrogance. Next up, not all acts of malicious compliance come from the workplace. Sometimes they happen right at the kitchen table. This story comes to us from Rigby Lou. The food is bad. My son has some special needs and is a reluctant reader and writer. He has never before taken initiative to read or write on his own. He is so enthusiastic about lots of other parts of learning. He is in OT and speech and has an IEP. He is, however, very gifted at finding the loophole in everything. It's entertaining and exasperating, and sometimes I'm just in awe. I made him lunch today, some chicken, rice, fresh fruit, and some snap peas, all things he normally likes. I thought it was a nice lunch. While he was eating, I had to make a call to schedule an appointment. He said, "I don't like this tastes bad, I want something else, I don't want this for lunch." Since I was on the phone, I said, "Eat what you can, please. I'm on the phone, and I don't want to hear you complain about your lunch again." He was very quiet for the next few minutes as I finished up my call. Then he handed me a piece of paper. My kid, who has never wanted to read or write, who I often have to sit with and do it with him the entire time, wrote for the first time on his own. It was a passive-aggressive note. He wrote for the first time to make a complaint. The note says, "The food is bad." I'm really proud and a little offended, but mostly proud. And, technically, I had not heard him complain about his lunch again. So, I'm not able to attach a photo of the note here, but I hung it on the fridge and told him I was very proud of him for writing it all by himself. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Jam on it. It says, "I like the way he thinks. He was still able to complain and you didn't have to hear about it. Combined with the proud parent moment to remember, this is a sweet story." Did anybody else on this one think that after OP told him to eat whatever he can, that he was going to go and loot the kitchen and get whatever food he wanted and just leave the stuff that OP made on the table? In all seriousness though, I really do hope this is an opening door moment for OP's son and that they'll continue to write more in the future. Even if it's just to go against what their parents said, it still works. In our final story, sometimes when management gives unclear instructions, the best move is to follow them exactly, tools and all. This story comes to us from Servant Girl 789. We have to take apart the old displays? Okay. In 1989, I worked for the planogram team at my local Target. We set up and took apart store displays and fixtures, which included product label updates and building out new display models. In February, we were assigned 6 weeks of overnight shifts to completely gut and then replace the home goods and furniture, hardware and automotive, and toys departments. Management promised us extra help and plenty of time to take down the huge furniture flats and rebuilds in the home goods, which had heavy display models, and were elevated onto huge precast shelves. Anyone who's ever worked in retail knows what I'm referring to. Management did nothing, and our new plans for the displays were to be given to us before we even started, and they were continually late. Toys and hardware automotive were fine. We finished those with no extra help within a day of when they were to be finished. The home goods and furniture plans were given to my boss at the start of our shift. along with the deadline of having everything finished in one night, which meant removing the old display models, taking them in tubs to the trash compactor, removing the shelves, along with the industrial carpet that was glued to the shelves, and clean the shelves before they were shipped off to another store, taking apart the furniture for the trash compactor so it would be easier to destroy in the compactor, building the new furniture displays, and putting them up on the new furniture flats. We were promised that we'd have 4 to 6 employees to help us that night, since a lot of the furniture was heavy, bookshelves and desks. We got F all. My supervisor, Dolores, was pissed, and rightfully so. We were left with a note to get all of that work done within our allotted shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Conveniently, the GM and other AMs were gone for the night, and no one answered Dolores' phone calls. Dolores was a big woman, former Army vet, 6'2" tall, and built like a tank. I'd never seen her so angry, or even angry, until that night. There were only 5 of us to do the work of 10 to 12 people. I watched Dolores climb up on one of the furniture flats, wait a moment, then, while looking straight into the security camera, kicked a fake cherrywood end table off the flat, and then jumped down on the flat. It splintered into several pieces. She then proceeded to stomp those pieces into many little pieces. OP, she said, what did it say to do with the old display models? I checked the list. It says to disassemble them and then take the pieces to the compactor so they'll be easier to compact. Dolores gestured to the flats. Team, that's what we're going to do. So I climbed up and knocked down a 3-shelf particle board bookcase with a fake walnut finish. It fell flat. I then jumped on the back of the case and broke through the particle board back. I then took my hammer and started smashing the sides of the bookcase. It came apart instantly. For the next 45 minutes, we climbed up on each one of those furniture flats, knocked down the displays, and destroyed them all. We had so much fun. It was extremely therapeutic. We then swept up the remains and put them into 2 tubs and left them by the compactor. We did manage to get the old displays down and put the new ones up. We were unable to remove the carpet from the old shelves as it was glued down, and we didn't have any solvents to use. We also left the new displays in their boxes as there was no time to put them together. Dolores waited until the morning AM showed up and then tore the guy a new one before leaving. When I came to work that night, the new furniture was already put together and up on the new displays. We were also given an apology by the regional manager, who Dolores called that day to let him know we'd been screwed over with an impossible deadline, and given a free pizza dinner for our trouble. I left Target 2 months later and moved out of state. Dolores retired 6 months later. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Wild Frosty. It says, Dolores didn't just follow instructions, she interpreted them with righteous fury. OSHA may not approve, but I do. Gotta love when bad instructions come back to bite the boss, and hey, they get a pizza party, so that's kind of a win, right? Because everybody wants pizza and not like a bonus or anything. This story comes to us from Vague Ambiguous Name. Boss took credit for my work. Malicious compliance occurred. A few years ago, I was hired as a manager to create the contracts department of a tech startup. My boss was on an opposite coast as me, and we barely spoke. About a year in, the company hired consultants to overhaul debts, except for contracts, because it was running so smoothly. I was truly proud of this. The company sent me on a paid trip to the Bahamas as a thank you. After I got back from vacation, I asked for a raise to director level. My boss said I just wasn't there. I asked for a list of what I would need to do to be a director. He sent me a list which was everything I was already doing, and basically admitted that if I was a director, he would no longer be able to take credit for my work. Friends told me I needed to either leave or put up and shut up. Instead, I chose to kill with kindness. I wholeheartedly apologized to my manager for overstepping, and said that I'm going to step back into the manager role. I printed out my manager responsibilities and posted them to my desk. Things went south quicker than I could have imagined. We started missing sales targets. Product said my boss agreed to a term in an agreement that would completely destroy their budget and product rollout. My boss didn't know commission agreements, and let sales manipulate contracts, so we were paying commission on contracts with termination clauses. I only interjected once to stop a contract amendment from being approved because my boss was unknowingly letting a VP artificially inflate sales numbers. The controller and CFO had to get involved. Eventually, the CEO was called in. Stories started circulating about my boss holding stress balls and cursing in meetings. I was more relaxed than ever, and during my newfound free time at work, I studied for and obtained professional certifications. I would also leave work early to get to the gym before it got busy. About a month after I unloaded my added responsibilities, my boss gave me a 7% bonus. It was unspoken, but I could tell he wanted me to take back on the director responsibilities without the title, but I continued to follow the manager description to a T. 6 months later, after taking 10 days of my unlimited PTO, I was included in layoffs, took 3 months off, and then got another job at a 35% salary increase. While I am happy to be making more money, I truly loved the company and people I worked with, and it's defeating to watch someone continually take credit for your work. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called AppropriateRip9996. It says, "If you put me in my place, I'll stay there." Another commenter down below called Taped Butterscotch025 said, "FYI folks, this concept is called work to rule. It's also common in places where there is a no strike clause, like many public agencies, but you want to show your discontent. And normally, it's very much supported by the union because you're still technically doing your job. Nice OP, congratulations on the raise and new gig." So what we're getting here is that OP's boss didn't want to do any of their own work. They wanted OP to do it all for them, and then wouldn't promote them because they were too valuable to him not doing his own work. Did I get that right? See, the issue with this is that too many people in the lower positions are just willing to roll over and take it from the boss because they think they're working their way up the ladder, when in all reality, they're just doing somebody else's work and not getting paid for it. Have you been in a position like this? I'd love to hear from you. Comment down below. Some people love to enforce the rules, right down to the tiniest detail. But when they get paired with someone who's really good at following those rules, things don't always go their way. This story comes to us from the guy who stole your... I'm not allowed to break the rules? Okay then. This happened to me a while back, but just came back to me. I used to work for an armored car company, something I did for a few years when I was in university and waiting for a position in what would be my future career. It was good money, and lots of people did it as their full-time jobs. But I wanted more out of life than a mindless job. Because I was classified as part-time, I did not have a set shift. I mostly covered for people when they were sick, took vacation, worked unscheduled shifts, or worked shifts created specifically for part-timers. All in all, I was working full-time hours almost every week. Most of the full-timers loved working with me. The way the company worked, you were set for a 13-hour shift. However, if you managed to complete your run in less than that, you'd still get paid the full shift. I was young, moved fast, and didn't care about breaks if it meant I could get paid for 3 to 4 hours to sit at home instead of working. So whenever I took over for someone older who was just on autopilot, I could get their coworker home in a fraction of the time. One of the full-time workers, a real Karen, let's call him Kyle, was just the worst. For some reason, he took it upon himself to tattle on people for anything that he didn't like. If someone weren't wearing their collared shirt under their sweater, run to tell management. FYI, working in the summer heat in a literal metal box wearing a bulletproof vest makes you want to shed layers. Someone wearing black instead of blue pants tells management. Someone wearing a company hat that has the company logo but is not official uniform tells management. No one in the company liked Kyle. Well, one week, Kyle's coworker has taken vacation, and my boss schedules me to replace him. The run is pretty easy. It's commercial day shift, so 90% of the stops are retail stores with less than a few $100 in cash. Because of the amount of money, no one has ever had a problem with one person jumping out and running in, grabbing the money, and coming back while the second person, usually the driver, stays with the truck. In this shift, I was the driver, so that's what I did. When Kyle was in the store, I would just navigate my phone, look at the people in the area, make sure there were no threats, make sure I wasn't parked in anyone's way, mostly wasting time. Well, one stop, Kyle came back and I was just finishing up writing an email. Apparently, Kyle wasn't too happy with me taking a few extra seconds to start going. Unbeknownst to me, he took a picture of me behind the wheel on my phone. I had no idea until the next shift came the next day, where management came to talk to me about texting and driving. I told them I had no idea what they were talking about, and my manager just said that he had proof I was doing it, and if I did it again, I would be written up. I went to talk to another coworker who is also the union rep to figure out what the heck was going on, and he told me Kyle took a picture of me yesterday and complained that I was doing it. I was pissed. Cue Malicious Compliance. My shifts with Kyle were 3 13-hour shifts, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Well, today was now Thursday, our last shift of this run, and this shift was not retail pickups. It was the run that takes all the money collected from the previous week and brings it to our provincial depot about 400 kilometers away. The entire run only has about 30 minutes of work and about 9 hours of driving. If you did the math, this is one of those runs where if you get it done quickly, if the traffic is on your side, you can get paid for a lot of unworked time. It was also the last shift of the week, which meant a long, gorgeous weekend in the middle of summer as soon as we were done. Well, I was going to make sure this shift lasted as long as possible. If he didn't want me to break any rules, I'd make sure I obliged. I drove exactly the speed limit the entire way. I even stopped for our 1-hour lunch break, which is given to us, but I had not witnessed anyone take in the years I'd been here because of the rules we had about pay. In fact, we were so behind, we reached the major city our depot was located in right at rush hour, something our early start time was designed to prevent. All in all, what should have taken about 9 hours to do ended up taking 14, an extra 5 hours where he just had to sit there and watch me in silence. To make things sweeter, a few times during the shift, he had to call his wife and let her know he wouldn't be home early enough to go to the cottage, and they would have to leave the next day instead. I heard from other workers how furious he was and how I'd ruined his plans for the weekend, and all I could do was smile. OP added an edit down at the bottom. It says, to clarify, where I live, going 15 to 20 kilometers per hour above the speed limit is standard. Going the speed limit will just get someone smashing into your rear bumper. Also, our trucks have a max speed of 105 kilometers per hour, and most of the drive is either 80 kilometers per hour or 100 kilometers per hour. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called TechNot. It says, the real question is, did he learn his lesson? Did you report him for being on his phone multiple times instead of monitoring the perimeter like he was supposed to? OP responded and said, I can't speak for anyone else, but he never gave me a hard time again. Another commenter down below called Equivalent Salary 357 said, I hope he understood why you were driving slower. I'm not sure why nobody in the comments mentioned this, but why didn't the guy that OP was driving with mention anything to OP during that drive like, hey, we could go a little bit faster, or hey, do we really need to take that break? It's like there was no communication there. They just sat back and took it. They were very, very passive, calling their wife and saying they weren't going to make it. They had more experience there. They should have just said to OP, pick up the pace, or maybe I need to do the driving. Sometimes a small inconvenience turns into a much bigger moment all over a single coin. This story comes to us from Rustic Crow, Aldi Quarter Fiasco. So yesterday, me and my wife went to Aldi for our weekly trip, but I forgot to keep our quarter in the car. Instead of trying to carry all our groceries around the store, I decided to try my luck and get change at the liquor store across the parking lot. So I walked in and waved to the kid and asked for some change. He gave me a little side eye and said no. To be honest, I'm not upset or surprised, but I figured I would try. As I'm walking out, I found some sugar-free soda my wife drinks for $2.24. Thankfully, I had $5 in my wallet, so I grabbed one, gave it to the kid, and asked for some quarters. The kid looks at me, rolls his eyes, and starts to ring me up for $2.76 and change. Now, I didn't think I was going to get a fistful of quarters, but as this kid hands me my change, he gives me $2 bills, a penny, 1 quarter, and a freaking half-dollar coin. I didn't notice until I left, and I noticed how huge the coin felt in my hand. I know I'm the bad guy, so sorry, I guess. Personally, I just find it hilarious cause I don't think I've owned one or held one in over a decade. Also, it made me think of y'all. Jumping down to the comments on this one, the most upvoted one here comes from a user called 16pack. It says, Aldi's cashiers always have change ready. Just walk in and they will hook you up. Another commenter down below called Bored Owl 1492 said, half dollars are still minted, just as $2 bills are still printed. They just don't circulate very often. You can always ask for both at your local bank. I personally like spending $2 bills for tips, so I ask for $200 at a time and never have any issues getting them. Just like the first commenter, I was wondering why OP went across the street to get their quarters when this is Aldi and they have carts you have to pay for, so you go inside and they have change. That's just how that works. I mean, if you think about it, they probably get requested for change hundreds of times every single day. So, OP, next time, just go inside. When a company decides to reward performance based on a curve, someone's bound to take that grading system a little too literally. This story comes to us from OK Marzipan 3163. Performance on the bell curve? So for years, it's been in my micro brain that the 3 levels of performance at my work can best fit to a bell curve, with a very small percentage of people, less than 1%, who are headed towards a performance development plan, making up the left-hand tail, and the exceptional people, around 5%, making up the right-hand tail. I used to bend over backwards in my efforts, with long hours, weekends, events missed, etc., to earn those high marks and get only a slightly better raise. In my last performance review, however, I was told straight up that no one in our division will be getting an exceptional this year as we don't have the workload to justify it. Okay, that's fine. I've reset my attitude and I'll just aim for the lower end of the bell curve then. Need a volunteer for some unplanned emergency work or someone to help build a business case for this or that new concept project? Don't look to me. If you want me to work on anything, you'd better assign it. Need help orienting the new employee or showing them around a facility? Not me. Just enough performance to avoid a PDP and nothing extra. I preach this philosophy to others at work and they think I'm crazy. If you want to give your soul to the company store, knock yourself the heck out. As a side note, there aren't layoffs in our industry as we stay busy enough and we have a perpetual customer base. This is just your daily friendly reminder that if you're in a job where there's no hope of moving up, don't do the work for the people above you, because you're not getting paid for it. Keep a copy of your job description in your pocket, do what it says you're supposed to do, and that's just gonna have to be good enough. If somebody wants you to do extra work, make sure that there's a way for you to move up there, or at least a way for you to get paid for that extra work. Nobody gets anything for free. This story comes to us from Bacon Potluck. You're not paid to think. Okay, so I didn't. A few years ago, I worked as a copywriter at a small PR agency run by a tyrant of a boss. Let's call her Marcy. She was all about control. One day during a strategy meeting, I pointed out a huge flaw in a campaign that could have cost our client major money. Her response? You're not paid to think, you're paid to write what I tell you. Cool, got it. From that point on, I followed her instructions exactly. No suggestions, no edits, no heads up when things were obviously going sideways, just pure, flawless compliance. Within 2 months, 2 major clients left over tone-deaf campaigns. One I had tried to fix, but was explicitly told not to. Guess who got blamed? Me. Guess who kept receipts? Also me. I forwarded my "just doing what you told me" email chain to HR. Turns out, this wasn't the first complaint. She was restructured out of the company 3 weeks later. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Cat Pain Calamari. It says, If this happened during a meeting, how did you get her to put this into an email and send it to you? Did you just ask? Opie responded and said, this meeting was a Zoom call, and I sent her the email during that time. She was one of the first people to speak, so I wrote it and sent it while another person was talking. Another commenter down below called DLC741 said, this is the opposite of what a manager friend used to say, we pay you to think. She would then explain that if the job didn't require thinking, we'd have automated it. 2 really quick points on this one. If you send an email to your boss asking them to confirm something that they've told you, they should really take a look at that email because this is one of those are you sure moments. And if a boss was smart, they'd realize what that meant. But in this case, obviously not. The comment of you're not paid to think made me remember directly back to working with Rick. Because if you had any suggestions for work that were outside of what he had told you to do, even if it was a better way that would save time or save money, he would tell you, you're doing it my way, I didn't ask for your opinion. I'm so glad I'm not there anymore. Screw you, Rick. Screw you very much. A rude customer demanded a cheaper price on his ham, so the meat counter guy gave it to him, thanks to a little accidental dyslexia. This story comes to us from one of our favorites, Ancient Educator 76. Dyslexia wins. Hey y'all, it's your friendly neighborhood meat counter guy. I had an order waiting for a customer who we'll call John. He ordered a whole ham. It was waiting all by its lonesome in our meat back room, untagged for some reason. I get it for him and weigh it out, and the price comes to $46.31. He begins to take the ham and then asks me to cut it in half. I said, well, okay, sure. But the second I agree to this, he says, oh, could you trim it off the bone? This carving is not only something I can't do, but it's a different price. I end up throwing out the original ticket instead of tagging it, mainly because I forgot. He took the ham from me and said, well, I'm sorry you're such an effing idiot and can't figure out how to cut a ham. When does the butcher come back? I told him that he comes in at 7 a.m. He leaves without additional incident, and I eventually get a call from the cashier who asks my dyslexic butt for the price. I said $31.46. Then he said, really? Which should have been an indicator. I suddenly hear the customer in the background grumbling his Dennis the Menace, Mr. Wilson grumble, as the cashier tells me that the customer doesn't think that's the right price, and I better change the price. Enter Malicious Compliance. I thought as this was going on that the cashier questioning the price was more like an oh wow that's cheap, and I realized the price I said was way too cheap. I told him, hey, tell the customer I'll happily change the price for him, and he can even come with to see the price change. Old Man River, John, Mr. Wilson, what have you, saunters back to the meat department along with his ham in a handbasket, looking like Little Red Riding Hood, with equally naive expectations of the next few moments of his life. In comes the big bad wolf to weigh the ham. I even say what I'm ringing up as I look up the code. So, whole ham, farmers, not spiral sliced, $2.49 a pound, here you go. Tag is for $46.31, which is visible to his side as well as mine. Oh, I see what happened. My bad, sir. My dyslexia kicked in over the phone. It was $46.31, not $31.46. Here you go. The audible exhale of breath was enough to energize me for the rest of the shift, just like Scream Juice or whatever it is that fueled Monsters Inc. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Pranker Joker. It says, Dyslexics of America, untie. P.S. Did you hear about the butcher who backed into the meat slicer? He got a little behind in his work. So I guess what this story is saying is that the customer tried to hog the savings, but really butchered his chances of getting a deal. It was a real ham-fisted negotiation. But OP came out on top. I guess you could say that justice was cured. This episode is proudly brought to you by me and by Carmen Chameleon, the official Karma Stories mascot, 3D printed in vibrant colors and clutching a chocolate chip cookie like it's the last one on Earth. You can grab your very own Carmen over at dangly3d.com. And if you're wondering whether he'll share that cookie with you, the answer is yes, but only if you follow and subscribe. and maybe whisper sweet nothings to the algorithm. He's cute, he's got attitude, and he sits on your desk silently judging all your life choices, which honestly is the emotional support we all need. And hey, free shipping on orders over $40 Canadian, which is like a burrito and a half in US dollars. So head over to dangly3d.com, grab a Carmen and an articulated dragon, or one of our fidget clickers, and bring some chaotic 3D printed joy into your life. The company told tech support agents to lie to customers about why their internet wasn't working, so one rep followed orders exactly and still found a way to make things right. This story comes to us from Riondo. Can you hear me now? DSL tech support. This might not belong here, but it's the best place I can think of to put this. When I worked in a DSL tech support role, there was one customer classification I kept coming across. Ones who had their DSL account in a pending state. What that would mean was that the phone line and the DSL was sold at the same time. The other thing it meant was that the DSL would not be turned on until the old sale was cancelled and re-entered into the system. Whenever I found someone who had their account in a pending status, I would tell them this and transfer them to sales so they could get it set up. After a while though, management got upset at this because it made them look bad. We were told not to tell the customer that it would never be fulfilled unless they talked to sales. Instead, we were supposed to say that the account was in pending status, and if the DSL wasn't turned on in a couple of weeks, to call back. We had customers call back for months because of this, getting more and more pissed since their DSL wasn't on. I finally got to the point where I would say, your account is in a pending status, let me transfer you to sales to see if they know why. So even though I didn't tell them that their DSL would never come on, like we were told to do, I hopefully got them the help they needed. That was the only job I ever abandoned. It was so stressful that at least once a week, we had an ambulance come get someone. One time, it was me when they thought I was having a heart attack. It was just a panic attack, the first and so far only one I've ever had. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called MichaelGum97. It says, let me get this straight. Management only cared about looking good rather than addressing the underlying issue and essentially wanted angry customers. And what the heck is this about calling an ambulance once per week? What kind of psychopaths were running this crap show? Okay, don't judge me on this, or, well, you know what? Judge me all you want in the comments down below. But I've worked in about 8 different call centers over the course of my lifetime careers, and I say yes, careers. But a lot of them were extremely toxic environments that were incredibly stressful, and the people at the top just made it even worse. They weren't there to help you, they were just there to get their numbers so they could get their bonuses. Call centers are some of the worst places to work, and my hat's off to everybody who actually stays in them because you're a better person than I am. Your stress management must be amazing. She cut him off before he could warn her, so he sat down on a nearby bench and waited to see if his instincts were right. What happened next? Let's just say the wind carried her mistake straight to him. This story comes to us from Jumping Crow Joker 24. Won't let me give you a warning? Stinks to be you. I'm not sure whether this would be better here in Malicious Compliance or in Off My Chest or Petty Revenge, but I decided to post this here first as I feel it fits in here pretty handedly. This happened about a week and a half ago. I was taking a walk in a small park that has a wooded area and a few walking trails. I decided I wanted to take the shortest path as it was getting late. About halfway through the path, I saw a skunk in the middle of the path. And I'm sure based on the title, most people already know where this is going. I turned around and decided it was not worth it to proceed further, and approximately halfway was enough. I exited the path the same way I entered, and as I was entering, I saw an old teacher of mine from high school. Let's call her Miss Samantha, not her real name. Miss Samantha was a teacher that went out of her way to nitpick everything I did in her class in high school. Note, it has been almost 12 years since I last saw her, and 13 since I was in her class. Anyway, with the backstory aside, I went up to greet her and said, "Hello, Miss Samantha, have you been?" And she cut me off. "Hi, I'm trying to take my daily walk down the shortest path. Don't bother me." I wouldn't. "You said hello. This conversation is over until I get back from my walk. Or you can walk with me and we can catch up. I just want to warn, this conversation is over for now. Wait until I finish my walk and we can catch up. Understand, OP?" At this point, I think for a moment. I am not the type of person who would normally just let someone walk into a potential skunking. But she was just rude to me twice and did nitpick everything I did in high school. So I chose to say nothing and just took a seat at the bench nearby. "See, was that so hard? We don't need to be a know-it-all. That was your issue back as a student." And Miss Samantha went down that path. As she did, I whipped out my phone and texted my parents that I'd be heading back to my childhood home a bit late. We'll help them out with the dog later, but eat dinner without me. I'll be here for a bit longer. One thing to take into account is that the entrance and exit for the shortest path we have exit parallel to each other. The entrance is on one side of the bench I sat at, and the other side was the exit. In this case, entrance behind, exit in front, so family can wait on the bench and see their relatives exit. Normally, I knew I'd see her on the way out if she'd completed the whole route, but in this case, I had a feeling I'd smell her coming out first, knowing her attitude. Sadly, my instincts were spot on. As I'm on my phone playing a few games, I heard Miss Samantha's voice vaguely in the background, and my thought at the time was, "Oh no, she ran into the skunk, here we go." And I do not joke that just as I finished my thought, I heard the sound of a woman yell, maybe a scream. I couldn't really make that out 100%. But the wind was blowing my way, so I was downwind of the path, the skunk, and her. So it wasn't long before I could smell what happened. Miss Samantha did eventually come out from the path's exit, and the smell she was emitting was awful. It reminded me a bit of raw horseradish getting peeled, as it was really eye-watering. She said. "I tried to warn you about that skunk. I figured it out when I got sprayed. You knew I'd react like that, didn't you?" I shrugged. "I wagered a guess, yeah. By the way, mind taking a few steps downwind so it's easier to talk?" After that, she gave me her phone number and asked me to contact her when I planned to come back. She hoped it wouldn't be when she was still reeking in skunk odor. As I said at the beginning of this tale, it has been a week and a half. She still has some lingering skunk smell. I found out that up until that moment, she was doing okay as well, but she also told me she got sprayed twice. When I asked her why she didn't turn back after being sprayed the first time, she told me if she already got sprayed and was going to smell like skunk anyway, she wanted to complete her walk. A fun little anecdote is that after everything, she admitted she was being petty, and when I told her I still wanted to study the foreign language she taught and took some classes in college, she told me that if I ever wanted to practice, to let her know, and she'll do it without the pettiness this time. To be honest, I think the skunking humbled her quite a bit, and hopefully she won't be forced to deal with residual lingering odor much longer. But anyways, thanks for reading. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Random Boomer. It says, there might be a human somewhere under that rough exterior. You were quite generous not to laugh at her, even though she well deserved it. OP responded and said, I like to try to be civil if possible, to the point my best friend has told me far too often, I am too nice. Another commenter down below called Pro David said, wait, so she nitpicked everything you did in class back then, you haven't seen her for over a decade, she insulted and disrespected you, and then she gave you her number? I can't decide if she or you are the weirder ones. OP, this woman treated you like crap back in school, and now over a decade later, she's still treating people like crap? I mean, come on, the way she talked to you, she definitely deserved getting sprayed by that skunk. But I don't think she deserved you being so nice. So yeah, you are right, you are too nice. Although I do want to mention that getting sprayed by a skunk can be an incredibly humbling experience. Don't ask me how I know that. When a family tried to quietly shun one of their own on Easter Sunday, they didn't expect the response to be so simple, or so powerful. One table, two sets of beliefs, and one very clear line drawn. This story comes to us from Real Bro. I shunned my religious family on Easter Sunday. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, in a very strict branch of Christianity, sort of like Mormon and Jehovah's Witness. I didn't actually leave it until I was around 40, just a few years ago. Today, being Easter Sunday, the family lunch was to be at my one sister's house. She's devout, and her husband holds a position in church leadership. They still do this practice where they will not eat with people who have been removed from their church's membership, due to some things Paul supposedly wrote. I have basically never skipped any family events as a result of a conflict of my and their principles. Only if I'm traveling or have really important plans have I skipped. My sister kept asking me if I'd be coming for lunch today, and I read the messages but didn't reply. The issue was brewing for me already, but I didn't have the guts yet to address the issue. Around lunchtime, my mom asked me if I was coming, and I said something like, "Probably not, because of your shunning beliefs." She assured me that there were just 2 separate tables side by side, and that those who left their church could be together at one of them. I said, "Nope, that's an issue for me, I won't be coming." I said basically, if you wish to shun me, then I'll make sure I'm fully shunned by not attending. I ended up eating some grocery store food by myself, and I'm not upset about it. I don't think we can blame OP for skipping that Easter lunch. When your own family would rather seat you like an outsider, your response should be just to not show up at all. It sends a message that they really can't ignore. Speaking of not showing up, Pope Francis met with JD Vance, Trump's VP, yesterday. Today, the Pope said, "Nope, I'm out. You tell me, coincidence or divine protest?" Either way, rest in peace to Francis, and condolences to the next poor soul stuck listening to JD Vance speak for more than 30 seconds. This story comes to us from Miss Vibey. You're not paid to think. Cool. Enjoy $7,000 in rotten shrimp. Back in 2022, I worked night shift at a grocery store in Florida, stocking frozen. One night, I noticed the walk-in freezer was at 20 Fahrenheit, should be 0. I go tell my manager, real hard butt, always barking orders like he's running a boot camp. He cuts me off mid-sentence. "You're not paid to think, just stock the damn shelves." Cool. Next morning, whole seafood section is trash. Shrimp, salmon, crab legs, all thawed and leaking. Store lost over $7,000. Corporate shows up pissed. Manager tries to throw me under the bus. "Why didn't you report it?" I just said, "Manager told me I'm not paid to think." They checked the cameras and audio, confirmed everything. Corporate backed me hard. Dave was reassigned, aka fired, a week later. Never saw him again. I got moved to dairy lead a month after. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Debosman. It says, "Dave wasn't paid to think either, and a good thing because he clearly wasn't capable." Opie responded and said, "Laughing my butt off, exactly. If thinking was part of the job, Dave would have been unemployed way sooner." Another commenter down below called Most Sane Psycho said, "A real manager exists to assist the employees. They facilitate training to make the job easier to understand or complete. They manage the employees' time to ensure there are enough people to complete the job as required, or there are extra people available to stop other tasks to assist during a rush. Your manager just got a $7,000 lesson in the value of employee feedback." It seems like we've had a lot of stories recently with managers telling employees that they're just not allowed to think. Definitely reminds me of working for Rick, because I wasn't allowed to have any original ideas. It was his way or the highway. Ugh. Screw you, Rick. Screw you very much. We're kind of on a roll with the screw you Ricks recently. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about Rick. This next story comes from someone who worked IT support for a municipal office, a job that had him out on the road most of the day. So when management stuck his team on kitchen duty, despite the fact that they were never in the building, he decided to follow the rule to the letter, and only the letter. This story comes to us from Not a Sword Master, kitchen duty. This is starting to be a long time ago now. I was working on IT support for a municipality, traveling around and fixing incidents and fulfilling requests. My team was at the office a varying amount, but I would say 80 to 100% traveling between tasks. As many who worked in offices probably have experience from, the kitchen is always a mess. Coffee cups and plates just laying around. We had even bought an industrial dishwasher with easy-to-load trays, one for plates, one for bowls, and one for cups and glasses. But people are stupid and lazy and put things on the bench or in the wrong tray. So a genius found out that we need a rotating kitchen duty plan. So everyone has one day where they are responsible for the kitchen. This wasn't a kitchen for making food, so it was basically just a coffee machine, fridge, and microwave. The list came out, and I saw my team on the list. So I immediately contact the ones responsible and explain that my team is traveling most of the day. We are rarely in the office and usually grab a lunch while traveling, so we shouldn't be on the list. They reply that everyone will be on the list. So again, raise the issue that we're not at the office, and I get a reply saying we'll just have to come to the office to take care of our responsibility. Here, my malicious compliance kicks in. My day comes up. So I go to the office, turn on an audiobook, and take my place in the kitchen. Whenever someone came into the kitchen to place something on the counter, I would make a noise pointing to the trays. If they put it wrong, I would point to the picture of where to place the thing. I did this for 7 hours that day. I got some questions about my workload, in which I replied I had a lot to do, but I had kitchen duty, so I wouldn't be able to go out to any of the incidents. After the second time I did this, and the big boss asked questions, the list was finally changed, and my team was removed. The person responsible for the list still thought it was unfair that we didn't have to do kitchen duty. Jumping down to the comment sections on this one, we have one from a user called Paul Dinap. It says, "Well played. Everyone should clean as they go. There ought to be no need for kitchen duty rotas, but they are the bane of office life. Also, well played on the interpretation of being in charge. The list writer assumes you're going to be cleaning up after others. You decide you're going to make them clean as they go, like they should." Another commenter down below called Silound said, "Instead of dealing with the problem people or paying for janitorial services, they concoct some absurd rotational schedule to punish everyone and avoid accusations. I found it to be very common in medium and small businesses." OP responded and said, "Very good point. I should have pointed it out in this way. Maybe someone would join in on my protest. My boss, who was a good boss most of the time, was bad at dealing with people who hadn't done what they should. She would sit in a meeting yelling about it until me and a colleague told her that we feel she's yelling at the whole team, when she and everyone knows it's one guy who is the problem. She did get better." I guess there would be two ways to handle this one. One, sitting in the room like OP did and waiting for everybody to make their mistakes and correct them. Number two would have been, just don't be there at all, go about your regular duties, and let the kitchen get dirty as heck. Then, when everybody else complains, you can state your case that I told you I wasn't going to be there. I did learn from working in jobs where you had to go to customers' houses that a lot of people live in conditions that we might consider to be, well, disgusting. And unfortunately, sometimes that transfers over to the workplace as well. They can be the best worker high up in management and doing really well at work, but when you look at their house, it's a disaster. This next story comes from a teenager on their way to their driving test, nerves high, dad riding shotgun, and tension building. But when dad insisted on his own very specific driving advice, let's just say his kid decided to follow it a little too well. This story comes to us from Bird to Bird, driving with my dad. When I was freshly 16, I drove with my dad to the driver's test. I had practiced a lot with my mom, but she grew up in the city and was a much more aggressive driver than my dad. This was my first time driving with just him in the car, and he wanted to help me practice on the day of my actual test. Well, he gives me the usual, every car on the road wants to kill you, and defensive driving stuff to the extreme. Very nitpicky about everything. At a stop sign, he berated me for stopping too abruptly. You should never accelerate whenever a stop sign is in sight. Take your foot off the gas as soon as you see a stop sign, no exceptions. I kind of argued with him that sometimes that wouldn't work. We live in a very flat state, and you can see stop signs from very far away sometimes. He got angry at me and told me he was just trying to help and I should accept his advice, etc. I said, fine. I also knew the next stop sign up on our drive was at the end of a 6-mile flat road. That isn't very busy. I planned my malicious compliance. As soon as I saw that stop sign, maybe half a mile out, I don't know because I'm bad with distances, I took my foot off of the gas. About 15 seconds in, we were going half the speed limit. 30 seconds in, we came to a crawl. I look away from the road and make eye contact with him for the last 10 feet or so. He was confused at first, but cracked a smile when he realized what I was doing. The car came to a full stop a good 15 to 20 feet from the stop sign. "What should I do now?" I asked. He just laughed, called me a smart butt, and was much more relaxed the rest of the day. I aced my test. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Tremenda Karucha. It says, "I can really picture my guy losing his crap if I took our driving lessons as literally, but props for the epic prank." OP responded and said, "He was more persnickety that day than usual, so it was a calculated risk on my part." Laugh out loud. I remember when my dad was teaching me how to drive, and he had the imaginary brake pedal on his side that he would hit even at the slightest little thing that didn't matter. Oh, that was so much fun. It does kind of make me wonder when my kids start driving if I'm gonna have an imaginary brake pedal too. I probably will, although I'll try not to be as jumpy as my dad was. This next story comes from a mom visiting her grown son. Just a simple dinner out, a bit of downtown traffic, and one request: help me watch for pedestrians. What she didn't expect was how literally he'd take that, or how hard she'd laugh because of it. This story comes to us from, heaven forbid, 3, Pedestrian. I, 54 female, went to visit my adult son, 30 male. We went out for dinner and I was driving. He was in the passenger seat. We had to go through downtown traffic and I asked him to help me watch out for pedestrians. I didn't specify pedestrians crossing the road. Pedestrians have the right of way. So, true to his humor, he notified me about every person walking. Every single person. Yelling, not too loud, "Pedestrian," and pointing to each person walking on the sidewalk. Oh my gosh, he has me in tears from laughing so hard. I made a monster and taught him a warped sense of humor. God, I love my son. Even a month later, when I went to visit him again, he'd do the same thing. I think this will forever be a thing, and I don't mind. Malicious compliance between us is just another way to mess with each other, and it's hilarious. I don't know what else to say, except that I'm proud of him. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Captain Fizz Red. It says, "My boss once asked for his team to remind him about a dentist appointment at 4 p.m. on Thursday. Cue us reminding him for several months with emails, Teams, post-it notes under jackets, in jacket pockets, you get the idea." OP responded to this one and said, "Laugh out loud, that's awesome. I can't ask my son to remind me about anything because he'll start reminding me as soon as I'm done asking him." Laugh out loud, guess who he got that from? Hey, does anybody else feel like mom could have played this one up a little bit and every time son said pedestrian, mom would slam on the brakes? It would have been a little bit of malicious compliance on malicious compliance, which would have been amazing. And I'm sure they would both laugh about it. This last story comes from a maintenance tech who warned his new boss about a serious problem right before the weekend. The boss's response? No overtime, no exceptions. What followed was a perfect lesson in why some rules are meant to be broken. This story comes to us from Ivodia 2025. Pipe exploded on the weekend, but hey, at least we saved on overtime. In 2006, I worked as a maintenance technician in a small office building. My job was to make sure everything works properly. Air conditioning, plumbing, electricity, all that stuff. Then we got a new boss from some big corporate office, and he was obsessed with cutting costs. First week he tells us all, in a very serious voice, from now on, absolutely no overtime, no matter what, no exceptions. We all kind of looked at each other like, is he serious? So Friday afternoon around 4:30 p.m., I get an alert from the boiler room. Pressure in one of the water pipes is very high. I check it and pipe is vibrating like crazy. I know if we don't release the pressure or fix it, it's going to explode. I go to the boss and tell him, this pipe is dangerous. I need maybe 1 to 2 hours overtime to fix it tonight. He looks at the clock and says, it's past 5 soon, no overtime, we'll handle it Monday. Okay, boss, no problem. So I go home. Saturday morning, I get a call from the security guard who works weekends. He's freaking out. Water's pouring out of the boiler room. It's flooded the hallway. What do I do? I laugh. I say, too late, nothing we can do now. Perhaps swim. On Monday, the boss walks in and smells wet carpet and disaster. Half the ground floor is underwater. Documents ruined. IT equipment drowned. Rest in peace. He comes to me angry. Why didn't you stop this? I just say, you told me no overtime. Pipe didn't want to wait until Monday. Cleanup cost thousands. And guess what? From that day, boss never said no to overtime again. In fact, from then on, when we reported just an inkling of a suspicion that something might be wrong, he simply said, do what you have to do, just don't tell me the hours. Sometimes, pipe is the best teacher. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Auto Redux. It says, I see why he went from a big office to your company. Probably canned his stupid butt for wasting so much money. Opie replied and said, he always reminded us little people how we didn't know how things are done in the big office leagues. We've learned from many stories in Malicious Compliance that the boss who tries to be cheap usually ends up being the boss that spends the most money. What kind of moron thinks it's okay to wait and not an emergency when they're told that the pressure is too high in a pipe? I mean, come on. This story comes to us from LargeArt9229. Send out defective parts? Okay. Years ago, I was head of quality control for a major partner company that built transmission parts for a big US automaker that started with F. My job at that company consisted of daily audits and testing of parts to make sure they met specifications and functioned correctly. One of the testing procedures was a machine that would test the parts to ensure they rotated 360 degrees without catching or getting stuck, and they either passed or failed. Failed parts would get reworked, of course. For the first year, the job was great, and I took pride in it because if you're spending over 50 grand on a new car, you'd want it to work properly, right? Well, after a year, the plant manager and CEO of the partner company came up to me one day and said that we would no longer be doing the rotation test. I was surprised because, for one, any changes in procedure have to be approved by F. And second, my written work instructions at the station has to be changed out, updated, and stamped with approval, which was standard procedure anytime work instructions were updated. The work instructions would also have to be reviewed by F. They told me to not worry about it and just stop testing the parts and to just pack them up and ship them. I definitely sensed a crap storm coming because we did unfortunately have a high defect rate, and without this test process, 30% of the parts the customer received would be bad. But cue malicious compliance. First thing I did was cover my butt. I typed up an official document stating I would not be responsible for any bad or defective parts that make it past me. Then I had it signed by the CEO and plant manager, who didn't even really bother looking it over. Then I had it notarized by our company's notary. Within a month, the results were clear. We were getting many complaints about bad parts, and parts were being returned at an alarming rate. Some higher-ups from F even did a walkthrough to try and see what the issue was, and that's when they noticed that we weren't testing the parts before sending them out anymore. I was called into the conference room later that day for a meeting with the plant manager, the CEO, and the higher-ups from F. The plant manager and CEO looked furious, and I knew they were going to put the blame on me, but I was prepared. Plant manager said, OP, the reason we called you in here is because it was brought to our attention that you aren't testing the parts before sending them out anymore. Is there a reason for this? He said with a smug look. I said, yes, you said not to test them anymore and to just send them out. The CEO said, that's not true, we never said that. I then proceeded to pull out the paper they mindlessly signed. Here's the agreement you signed saying I'm not responsible for any bad parts getting sent out. and how we're no longer testing them. The plant manager and CEO's faces both went pale, and I then gleefully handed the paper to the higher-ups from F. I was then asked to leave the room, and on my way out, I handed my 2 weeks notice to the plant manager because I knew this company was screwed and I had another job lined up. Long story short, they lost their contract with F and got sued for $3 million. The company shut its doors, and last I heard, they filed for Chapter 3 bankruptcy. I don't know what happened to the building or anyone else that worked there, and I don't even care, but I do know F had a major part shortage for a while after this. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called C. It says, an FU move would have been handing the F guy the paper and asking if they're hiring QA people. OP responded and said, their quality sucks now anyway, so I wouldn't have wanted to work for them anyway. Another commenter down below called Avid Learner said, the fact that company execs would recklessly sign off on abandoning quality control checks only to see their reckless gamble blow up in their faces, it's just stunningly irresponsible, and I can't help but wonder how many other corporations are harboring similar dangers within their ranks. OP responded and said, this has happened at pretty much every company I've worked at. Higher-ups make stupid decisions, and it always backfires. So here we have another case of an employee taking something that the higher-ups said, asking them to get it in writing and even sign the paper, and they just don't realize what they're doing. A message to all the managers out there: when one of your employees comes to you with a paper and says, hey, can you sign this? It just says what you told me to do. You better think long and hard about what you told that employee to do, because there's a really good chance, like 90%, that it's going to bite you in the butt. HR swore the new time clock could ignore anything brief, so OP set out to see just how costly their little grace period could get. This story comes to us from Nogu2K. We don't pay extra time if it's under 15 minutes. Okay, I can make it work. I was a software engineer for a company, and out of nowhere, they implemented an electronic control on our work time. Before that, we would work extra on good faith. If I had to do 2 more hours one day, the next day, I could get in 2 hours later without a problem. In the new system, I had to clock in at 8 a.m. If I didn't, it would consider I was late and lose the entire first hour, and clock out at 5 p.m. with 1 hour lunch break. Work laws here in Brazil are different from ones in the US and most of the posts here. If the company tracks your work time, they have to pay you extra time on anything over 40 hours a week. Sometimes I would get in a bit earlier, like 8:50 or something, and leave at 5:10 p.m. At the end of the first month, I was surprised my extra hours were 0. On the previous system, I wouldn't care, but they were the ones that decided to track this. I decided to do some digging on how the tracking software worked and found out that anything less than 15 minutes per check-in was completely ignored. 99% sure that was against the law, but I could work with that. From that day on, guess who arrived 16 minutes earlier every day? Came back from lunch 16 minutes earlier if I was done and had nothing else to do, and left 16 minutes later. At the end of the second month, management called me in to explain why I had over 3 times more extra hours than most of the other workers. I just told them to check their system. I'm not the one keeping track of that anymore. To my surprise, they actually did pay everything that was owed. I could sue and easily win, and did not change how the system worked. I kept doing that for another 3 months before changing jobs to a remote one. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Corinnan38. It says, inflexible systems are made to be broken. Nice to hear that the employer actually paid you afterwards. Another commenter down below called Zintin said, when a system is broken, you must show them that it is broken and let it fail. OP mentioned in this one that in the new system they had to clock in at 8 a.m. and if they didn't, it would consider they were late and they would lose the entire first hour. That's absolutely wonderful. So that means you don't need to clock in until 8:59, right? I mean, if you're already late by a minute, you might as well just push it out the rest of that time if you're not going to get paid for it anyway. After smashing every target for 2 straight years, one top performer missed a quota by 1 and got slapped with a remedial workshop. So he decided to give management exactly what they asked for. Nothing more, nothing less. This story comes to us from Scary Expert 1929. Punishing me for underperforming for 1 day in 2 years? No problem. Hello everyone, I will try to be concise. Background: I work at a company where I handle mid to high level complaints to managers, PR, and legal. My daily requirement is 40 cases handled per day. There are some of my team colleagues that struggle with this, but I don't, and I don't feel lazy to stop at 40. So I have handled 50 to 55 basically every day for the past 2 years. There is no bonus or even recognition for this. I just did it because I felt a friendly obligation to the company. Complaints can be a 5-minute resolution or a 2-hour Zoom call with our New York lawyers. It's a gamble, really. The event. Recently, I had a day where I felt a bit sick and at the same time had bad luck getting only very hard cases that required more time. So I had 39 cases, one under the requirement. I thought nothing of it as my weekly average was way off the charts, 50 plus as usual. The very next day, I felt better and went back to my usual high numbers. Come Monday, I had an emergency one-on-one with my manager where I was informed that I had to attend a 3-day workshop seminar on how to best meet requirements because I underperformed last week. My jaw dropped and I asked, don't they count the weekly, monthly, and yearly numbers? To which I was told that the daily requirement is 40 and this is standard practice. Nothing we can do. Basically, it was a workshop for underperformers who had 20 to 30 out of 40 cases daily. It was nothing hard, but I did need to drive there for 3 days after work and listen to HR guys giving bad advice, as they never actually handled the cases in real life. And I had to talk about what I will do to improve my numbers and reach the 40, as the nonsense HR talk calls it. This made me lose hours and hours of my free time, and I was livid. After it was over, I had a long think, and I decided that I will do exactly that. I will reach the 40, and that's it. The aftermath. For the past few months, I go into work, I handle 40 cases, my daily requirement, and then I do nothing for the rest of my shift. I have had multiple one-on-ones with my manager during this time, and I am constantly asked, is something wrong? To which I naively reply, no. Am I in trouble? Am I underperforming? And then of course they say that I am 100% within daily requirements, and that way I shut the conversation down. This is real life, so I can't say a clever comeback or something like that, but I do keep playing the fool that has no idea what is wrong now. But I find satisfaction in knowing that they got used to my overachieving and are now suffering for the lack of it. Before Easter, they put up an internal ad for promoting another 2 managers, so my guess is now that is the number of people they will need to pay extra just because they lost me as an overachiever. And they lost me for no reason other than their own stupidity. Thank you all. I hope I did not bore you. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called C Granny. It says, I would have asked the HR person giving the talk so many questions about the hard cases you get and what to do when the company's lawyers have you on the phone for hours. Do you just hang up on them after 10 minutes? Another commenter called Medic Jambi said, OP, it may be worth saying that the recent HR training demonstrates how important it was to make exactly 40 cases each day, and that now you strive to achieve those exact numbers, because those were the numbers they made sure to point out were important. Keep stressing how they pointed out how important 40 was. This story kinda hits me on a personal level because it reminds me of the last call center that I worked in. My team lead had realized that I wasn't really pushing extra sales on my tech support calls. Like, I was supporting internet and they wanted me to push phone sales to everybody who I was talking to. So they put the quality person with me many times to get me to try and sell. It kind of worked out in my favor though, because me and that quality person have now been married for 14 years. A power-tripping assistant manager tried to commandeer the only pharmacist not on her shift, until a single X on the schedule taught her an unforgettable, sleep-deprived lesson. This story comes to us from Prestigious Promise 20. She thought I was working that day. I was, just not at that store. In the early years of being a pharmacist, jobs in my city were hard to come by. I managed to get full-time hours by working for a couple of pharmacist friends at both of their stores. They would work out my schedule together and put an X on my schedule on the days I was at the opposing store. One store was downtown, and one was in the suburb I lived in. At the suburb pharmacy, I had a coworker, D, who would just not wrap her brain around the fact that if there was an X by my name, I was in fact working, just at the other store. Multiple times, I would have call after call on my cell phone and hang-ups on my answering machine at home because she wanted me to cover her shift at the suburb store when I was already working downtown. Worst thing was, my cell phone charged me for every single call, so after the second time of her pulling this, I would get downtown and immediately pull the battery out of my phone. This made her angry at me for ignoring her, and we had a tepid relationship after that. Time went on, and the suburb store started expanding their nursing home operation, so I was able to work there full-time instead. I still had a great relationship with the downtown store, and they had me keep the keys in case of emergencies. They would occasionally come up, and the X would be on the schedule by my name. Sadly, D became the assistant manager, and now thought she was the boss of me. Now, downtown pharmacist's daughter was getting married, and suburb pharmacist was invited to all the festivities. I got scheduled to work the Thursday before at the downtown store. The X went by my name on the suburb schedule. I was also going to the wedding. I was good friends with the daughter, but missing the Mendy party on the Thursday I was working for her mom. I was on the phone with her on my break one time, and she was saying how sorry she was that I was missing it. And I said, don't worry, I'll just doodle brown Sharpie all over my hands and pretend I was there when we aren't busy. Now, at that exact week, we were getting new pharmacy software downloaded. Nursing homes are run on a batch system where all the labels are run about 5 days before, and then all the bubble packs are made up during that time. And then the actual billing is done on the Thursday for the meds to be delivered Friday. Dee decided that she did not want the batch to be done and just wanted everything to be processed and made up on the Thursday for just this first week. My technician was freaking out, so I just told her to make up the usual drug cards, Lipitor, Aspirin 81, multivitamin, Altase, etc., without any patient data, just to help speed things along. Dee overheard and told the tech that she wasn't allowed to do that, and this younger generation is just scared of hard work. I panicked a bit because I was the only one of my age, Gen X, as all my coworkers were boomer-aged and older. I went and checked the schedule. Yep, there's an X by my name. I won't be there for the crap show, but somehow Dee thinks I am. Why should I tell her any different? Thursday rolls around, and at 12:30, my cell phone starts blowing up. It's in my purse in the safe because I don't get a lunch break, only pharmacist, and everyone can hear it. Out comes the battery. I get home after work, and there's screaming and swearing on my answering machine. A locum pharmacist worked the morning shift and wasn't instructed to do anything, so everything was left for Dee when she arrived at 12:30. She had to work late to finish over 500 prescription drug cards. I come in the next day, and she's still furious. You said you were working. I heard you talking about the effing Mendy thing. I told her I was working, just not at that store, as evidenced by the X by my name. I learned then that she could eavesdrop on the break room from one place in the pharmacy when she herself was the only pharmacist working at the time. All my breaks were taken in my car after this. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called CoderJoe1. It says, she fell into the trap of being too stupid to realize it. Another commenter down below called Maddie Gator said, I guess she overdosed on her own power. Though I can't believe Dee was still assistant manager after that. You'd think that intentionally risking not being able to get medication out on time would be a huge violation of policy. Opie responded and said, it was pretty much to placate her. I think she got 50 cents more an hour for way more responsibility, but I was the same age as her kids, so that didn't help. OP could have taken this one a lot further. It's a good thing this wasn't in pro revenge or nuclear revenge, because this person would have been fired for sure. They left voicemails with screaming and cussing on OP's machine. That alone would be more than enough reason for termination. OP, it doesn't matter if you were the same age as her kids, you deserve respect. You are a pharmacist as well. You did the schooling. You have the job. You are a colleague, not one of her kids. This story comes to us from Deeprox. No problems, just look in your textbook. About 15 years ago, I was almost 20 and in my country's equivalent of a trade school for electricians. One of our teachers, electronic circuits class, had a kind of annoying catchphrase for every question students had. No problems, just look in your textbook. He had already mentally checked out since he got a way better job lined up for next semester. So he pretty much only read stuff from the textbook and then switched to the textbook's practical exercises, where we had a breadboard and, working in pairs, inserted resistors, capacitors, and other components in it. All in all, not the worst teacher we had, but this one incident made his class very memorable. On the third class we had with that teacher, first one was introduction, second one was how to read resistor color codes. He said his catchphrase no less than 5 times per class. My friend showed me a glaring mistake in the textbook's practical exercise. It was something very simple, placing 3 resistors in series, measuring the current produced with a 24-volt DC power supply, and comparing to the values we had calculated. The first 2 exercises were okay, but in the third one, the values for all resistors were way too low, like 3 orders of magnitude low. Somebody meant to write 10 kiloohms, but typed 10 ohms instead, for every single resistor in that exercise. For people who are not very familiar with electronics, Ohm's law dictates that, for a constant voltage supply, current gets higher as resistance gets lower. Voltage equals resistance times current, or V equals RXL, which can be written as I equals V over R. Joule's law dictates that more power, which in a resistor's case would be dissipated as heat, is supplied, the higher is the current. Power equals resistance times current squared, or P equals RXL squared. Resistors have a power rating measured in watts, and when the rating is exceeded, they start to produce smoke and or fire. The power rating for the resistors we were using was 0.25 watts. When resistors are placed in series, their total value is added. In this example, 3 10-ohm resistors would have a total resistance of 30 ohms. If we use the previous formulas, we get a value of 0.8 amps for current and 19.2 watts for power, or almost 77 times the power rating of the resistors. If the 10 kiloohm resistors were used, we'd have a 0.8 milliamp for current and 19.2 milliwatts for power, well within the power rating of the resistors. My friend, I, and a few other students tried to ask the teacher if those values were correct, and his answer to no one's surprise was, no problems, just look in your textbook. I tried to argue that the textbook was plain wrong, and he shut me down, saying how way smarter people than him and I wrote the textbook, so we should just follow it. So everyone, some more reluctantly than others, placed the resistors on the breadboard, connected the power supply, and waited for his instruction to turn it on, as has been for the first 2 exercises, without incident. Then he said to turn on the power supply, without even looking in the textbook. At first, everything seemed fine, and some people started to get their multimeters. A few seconds later, a girl screamed, "Fire!" but it was really only smoke. A few seconds later, and we now had small fires all over the lab, and people freaking out. Nothing spectacular, and they died down a few seconds later, but enough to make most of the 30 people scream and panic, while the smelt of burnt plastic from 15 breadboards and burnt ceramic from 45 resistors made the air pretty much unbreathable. To his credit, the teacher engaged the lab circuit breaker pretty fast and evacuated the room so no one breathed potentially toxic fumes. Since I was expecting it, I was more annoyed than scared, unlike some of the more sensitive people who were crying, and told the teacher, who was looking at the empty lab as if he was seeing ghosts, There seems to be a problem. Should you look in the textbook now? He gave a nervous laughter and said, maybe you're smarter than the people who wrote it. The screaming attracted a more experienced teacher who, after making sure everyone was okay, just couldn't stop laughing at our teacher. He did keep using his catchphrase, no problems, just look in your textbook, until the end of the semester. But he was now also looking in the textbook himself and spotted a few glaring mistakes made by those intelligent people. For some reason, he didn't seem to like the nickname we gave him when we heard someone saying it in the hallway. Next is Textbook Idiots Class. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Illuminatus Prime. It says, when I got to the part that said he had already mentally checked out since he got a way better job lined up, I had a hunch this was going to be another classic Malicious Compliance. And I was right. You followed the teacher's instructions to follow the book instructions, knowing the results would range from a quiet fail, at least, to a flaming disaster at most, and you were right. I'm glad no one was physically injured, but why did no one pull the fire alarm? That would have really topped off the day. OP responded and said, small-scale fires that died down quickly, look for resistor burning videos on YouTube if you're curious. People were more startled than anything, but it did cause quite the commotion. Fire alarm was a few meters down the hallway, if I remember correctly. Come to think about it, that building was not very safe. So are we saying that this story was a textbook example of malicious compliance? I do have to admit though, hearing that this professor actually does look at the textbook now, after this big old snafu, well, that's a nice thing to hear because a lot of times they don't learn from their mistakes and just keep doing things the way they've always done. Especially one like this who has already checked out, as they said, because they're leaving for a better job later, and this one just doesn't matter, which means the students don't matter too. And that is kinda sad. When a penny-pinching boss demands the kitchen save every last drop of tomato sauce, his brilliant cost-cutting trick ends up adding a very unexpected ingredient to the recipe. This story comes to us from William26. Stop wasting ingredients. Years ago, I worked as a laborer in a food production company. Kind of a mom and pop size production distribution facility. We made all types of food and sauces. One of the more mundane steps to a particular sauce was opening and emptying large cans of tomato sauce into a large mixer. Pretty simple, just open, pour, and toss the can. One of the higher-ups decided we were wasting a lot of the sauce by not thoroughly cleaning out each can. We're talking probably 20 to 30 ounces of tomato sauce per batch, which was probably around 2 to 3% waste. I get it, every cent counts. The problem was, the solution they came up with was to use these rubber spatulas to clean out the extra sauce from these metal cans. It didn't take a scientist to see that this would not work out well with the cans being sharp and cutting into the rubber, leading to rubber going into the sauce. I tried voicing concerns, but was shut down. I assumed they just thought we were lazy and didn't want the extra work. So we do as we are told and start cleaning the cans thoroughly. Sure enough, about 10 cans in, we notice our spatulas missing large chunks of rubber. I hand one of the spatulas to my supervisor and he takes it to his boss. On cue, he comes back about 2 minutes later and says, "Don't worry about scooping out the cans anymore." That was my first taste of, maybe being a manager doesn't mean you have all the answers. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Avid Learner. It says, that feeling when you realize someone in authority is completely oblivious to basic operational realities, and you're just left to watch the inevitable happen. Like, really. It's incredible how some people just don't grasp fundamental things. OP responded and said, or they can get so hyper-focused on a brilliant idea that they had and can't or won't accept criticism. Is it creepy to anyone else here that OP didn't say they had to completely throw out the batch of food that they made with those spatulas? Because there's rubber bits in there, and I bet you that doesn't meet whatever food code they're supposed to be following. It really is concerning. A freshly expanded hospital wing meets a cocky manager who swears they need no extra staff, and his bold promise is about to boomerang hard. This story comes to us from Milled Oats. I stake my reputation on the fact we don't need any extra staff. Years ago, I was a union delegate for a hospital that underwent expansion. More services, more beds, an extra operating theater, etc. Before the expansion opened, the usual fight between the unions and management started over staffing. We went in really well prepared and management took it well, offering staffing we wanted. We had a final meeting with about 40 people in the room. HR, department heads, and the various unions. We get to a department I will call ABC, and the department head says, we don't need any extra staff except for nurses. I argued, you have more space and more beds, and you need more cleaners, wardsmen, admin staff, etc. He fires back, I stake my reputation on it that we don't need any extra staff. I ask the minutes record this specifically. A meeting is set down for 4 weeks after the hospital expansion opening. We let him have his way, knowing he wouldn't be successful. Guess whose department turned into a complete farce? Nothing terrible, just lots of little issues. At the next union meeting, again, with all people previously present, I read out the list of issues Department ABC has. I then read out the last minutes with him stating they didn't need any extra staffing, and that the department head had staked his reputation on it. I then asked the head of ABC to justify all of this. He couldn't. I asked him, as he staked his reputation on this and the outcomes have been poor, what does that mean? He gave no answer. I looked towards the CEO and said, you were here last time and the buck stops with you. He agreed to review the situation urgently. The union placed the hospital into formal industrial dispute at the meeting over the lack of staffing in Department ABC. The next day, the CEO sends out an email stating after a brief conversation with the head of Department ABC, he has chosen to seek different career opportunities. This is another case of a worker getting an instruction from somebody higher up and then asking them to make sure that it was written down. That person higher up should be looking at what they said and really wondering why they wanted it in writing. But I guess our managers don't really think that way, do they? Another thing on this one, I love the corporate jargon of they chose to seek different career opportunities. But I think my favorite one was they were given the opportunity to seek employment elsewhere. When an 18-year-old referee invents a show up 30 minutes early rule to squeeze his younger assistant, he's about to learn the whistle can blow both ways. This story comes to us from Obvious Secretary 151. Show up 30 minutes early? Sure, Dave, as long as you do too. I am 15 years old and work as a soccer referee. I will normally arrive 10 to 15 minutes early to a game, which is plenty of time to check in players from both teams and make sure the field is in proper playing condition. One game I showed up to as an assistant referee, my center ref, 18 years old, let's call him Dave, told me that all refs have to arrive 30 minutes early to every game. I know this is not true, and stayed silent. We refed the game as usual and returned to where we put our stuff at the end of the game. Dave told me that because I didn't arrive 30 minutes early, he would mark that I didn't show up, basically telling me that I wouldn't get paid for the game we just worked. I complained that this was a rule that he made up. He left the game without saying anything else, figuring that would be all. Note, if you referee without any assistant referees, you get paid like $5 more. I think this was Dave's plan. When I got home, I made sure to sign up to be center referee at every game where Dave was an assistant referee. Poor Dave showed up to his next game 15 minutes early, which is absolutely unacceptable. I said nothing the whole game, but only marked him absent, which means he wouldn't get paid. This went on for a week and a half until his paycheck came in, and he was about $120 off of what his total should have been. I did make sure every game that Dave was less than 30 minutes early. Dave emails one of the main referees who runs everything to see what the problem was. One of the main referees, let's call him John, told Dave that he wasn't there, so he wouldn't get paid. Dave put 2 and 2 together and realized what I did. Emails were sent between Dave, John, and I until John had the full story. Dave was fired for making up rules, and I got paid for the first game with Dave. Don't take advantage of young people. Take that, Dave. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called NoLeopard556. It says, I love it when a rules for thee but not for me kind of person gets bit in the butt like this. Another commenter down below called Deep Depth 6 said, what kind of effed up system allows you to take away pay from someone else without any proof? Dave is a scumbag, but the problem was definitely avoidable. OP, at 15 years old, having the balls to take on the older referee is absolutely amazing, and skills like that will help you out as you get older. Now, I know the person in this story was named Dave and not Rick, but I really do feel like we need to put something in here, like maybe a screw you, Dave. Told to haul gear up a crumbling stone staircase and later mocked for being fussy about the rain, one church groundskeeper flips the rulebook and leaves management out in the cold. This story comes to us from Dev Legion. Break health and safety? No problem. And we don't work in the rain? Excellent. This is a two-parter. My initial malicious compliance probably contributed to the cause of the second, and it all happened roughly 2 years ago. I used to work for the local church as a groundskeeper and other odd duties. One of the odd duties was going upstairs to brush and vacuum the open floor. It wasn't an odious job, but getting up the very old, worn, and uneven stone stairs was a pain with a vacuum, brush, bucket, etc. One of the first times it happened, I noticed several of the brackets that held the thick rope handrail were either loose or came out completely if you weren't careful. I reported this and was told the parish council had known about it for 3 years. I kinda got annoyed about it at this point because if it came out when you had the vacuum on your back, it had a rucksack harness, and you slipped, it's a heck of a fall backwards. Not to mention the thousands of tourists that used to go up those steps, it could lead to serious injury. I also said that I was marking the date, and any injury caused by the stairs, I'd immediately advise H&S. I said to my immediate boss that I wouldn't be going up them until the issue was fixed. She seemed a bit shocked, but said she'd say something at the meeting. True to my word, when asked to go clean, I refused. Weirdly, the issue was fixed within a month or so. Roll on a few months and I was called into a meeting with the parish council's employee contact. Long story short, in the first, I was told my job was secure. I was asked to come in for a second meeting a month later. Agreed at the time of the first meeting, and was told I was being laid off at the end of the year. This was August. I did win a discrimination case against them, but that's a different story and not malicious compliance. There's been an ongoing joke about the parish council saying we didn't have to work in the rain. I'd been asking for general work and rain gear since I started working there the previous year, but wasn't too bothered because I had plenty of old work clothes from previous jobs. After the employee contract informed me that I was being laid off and was unemployable, and a year of asking for rain gear, I'd had enough. So every time it even drizzled, I went inside. If it stopped, I came out. Thankfully, my colleagues were fine with this. They knew the score. As it was coming towards autumn, I did less and less work. I just sat with my feet up. This carried on until the end of October, where I just booked the rest of the year as a holiday. Additional info, I was on a disabled work scheme via the government, so it was documented what I was and wasn't capable of. This also was adhered to even more strictly than before, and if any job even looked like it might fall under the umbrella of the if he thinks it's too much, he can say no rule. All in all, I helped my colleagues as much as needed, but my workload dropped massively as I started to go inside to avoid the rain and refused to do the jobs I didn't necessarily have to do. OP added a couple edits down at the bottom. The first one says, by making sure my immediate supervisor brought up the issue with me refusing to work until the stairs were fixed in a council meeting, it made sure the problem was recorded in the meeting minutes, so proved it was a known problem. The second edit says, because rain gear wasn't provided with the necessary protective clothing, I was not legally required to work in any weather but dry. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Sidwin. It says, I'm assuming from the wording in some paragraphs this was in the UK. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry and let me know. Just because you Brits are not as likely to sue as us Americans doesn't mean it won't happen. 1 or 2 injured tourists could be devastating. Opie responded and said, I'm British, but I live and work in the EU. We actually do get a fair few Americans visiting the church, up to 2 or 3 coachloads a week at peak. The UK is getting as bad as the US for suing. I know of one case where a 40-year-old woman returning to work after the kids grew up sued the sandwich chain she got a job at because she sliced her hand open on a bread knife. The reason behind the case was nobody told her the knife was sharp. The barrister I was talking to, who defended the chain, and me had a right laugh over that one. I agree with OP on this one. If something isn't safe and you know it's not safe, and people are telling you to do it anyway, yeah, you just refuse, because there's no point in you carrying something up those stairs, having the handrail fail on you, and getting injured while you fall all the way back down. Especially since they were stone stairs inside a church, and that would definitely hurt. This story comes to us from ZZ Del Marco. I wore a suit to work and got my supervisor soft demoted. I'm posting mainly because I'm not a passive-aggressive type, and I'm in disbelief that this actually worked. Ever since I started my job a few months ago, my supervisor, we'll call him Josh, has been micromanaging me. When I'm the subject of criticism, which is often, I try to give him the benefit of the doubt and ask him to clarify. What are your expectations? What specifically should I have done differently? Josh's responses are always vague, often something to the effect of, just do better. I even had a meeting with Josh and HR to address this, but to no avail. Yesterday, Josh comes to my desk to tell me I need to dress better. Now, I work at a small company, and the vibe is unusually casual. A not insignificant number of people come to work wearing jeans, hoodies, t-shirts, and or baseball caps. I have never worn a hat to work, and I make a point of wearing a button-up shirt with a collar every day. This particular day, I was wearing a long-sleeve button-up flannel, chino pants, and Adidas Gazelles. Other days, I wear loafers and dress shirts that are tucked in. So I asked Josh to clarify, should I be wearing dress shoes, dress shirt, tucked in? What specifically do you want me to change? Josh tells me I just need to dress better and that I should talk to HR for clarification. So I go into HR and ask, what is the dress code? I get a standard answer: pants, closed-toed shoes, no sleeveless shirts, etc. I ask, have I ever worn anything to work that poses a problem? HR says, no, you're fine. Because I'm mad and because my repeated efforts to resolve this kind of problem had gone unheeded, I decided to be petty. The next day, today, I showed up to work in a full suit. It's one I keep for events like weddings, so it's fitted and I look really sharp in it. It's also wildly and conspicuously overdressed for the office I work in. I had several interactions with people coming to my desk to comment on my outfit and ask what the occasion was. When anyone asked, only if they asked, I told them I had been told to dress better. This was always met with disbelief. 2 people even said they liked the way I dressed normally. When anyone asked me who the order came from, again, only if they asked, I told them it came from Josh. I was expecting to pull my little stunt for a week just to prove a point and then go back to wearing what I had been wearing before. Word got around the office fast, apparently, because the CEO, Josh's direct boss, came to my desk later in the day to tell me I would be reporting to him now, and that he'd be having a talk with Josh about this and other issues. It's important to note that I was Josh's only underling, so he effectively went from being a supervisor to just a regular employee. I'm on a bit of a high now. I think I'm going to come into work tomorrow wearing a different one of my flannels. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called CoderJoe1. It says, dress for the boss you want to have, not for the one you currently have. Another commenter down below called Krakatoa83 said, wear a tux tomorrow and demote the CEO. So are we saying that being a supervisor didn't suit him? Was he trying to make sure that nobody slacked off? Well done to OP for buttoning up the win on this one. Okay, I'll stop with the puns. They all were kind of off the cuff though. What do you do when the packing line robots start spitting out mangled fruit, but your boss snarls, "Just count and keep quiet"? This story comes to us from Diamond Dust 1. You're only here to count. Hi everyone. I wanted to share my story from a job. I work at a place where we pack fruit. There are about 20 robots that fill boxes with fruit, and there's one position in charge of checking that each robot puts the correct amount of fruit in each box. To explain it a bit more, we basically have to check all day that the robots are doing a good job, make sure each box has the right amount of fruit, and keeping track of which robot packed it. Hope that makes sense. Obviously, since it's heavy machinery, sometimes the robots damage the fruit. So when I'm checking a box, it's possible to find fruit that's been cut in half or otherwise damaged. When I first started, I was assigned to that checking position. It was pretty simple. Count the fruit in each box and return it to the export line. But whenever I found damaged fruit, I used to write it down in a section of the control log called comments, noting how many damaged ones I found. I also started reporting it to a woman from the quality team. She didn't like that. She kept telling me that it wasn't my job, which is technically true, but I thought it was important to say something when the damage was a lot. One day, all the robots started sending out fruit that was cut into multiple pieces. No idea how. So I went to report it again, and this woman confronted me and said, "Your job is only to count, and count. That's it." She said it in a very rude tone and sent me back to the station. Of course, I thought, she's totally right. So instead of getting upset whenever I found damaged fruit, I just counted it like a normal one, closed the box, and sent it down the export line. That's how I spent the whole day, just counting, nothing else. Until the export inspection team noticed there was a lot of damaged fruit already packed and ready to go. The quality managers came to talk to me and asked why I hadn't reported it. I just pointed to the woman and said, "She told me my job was only to count, and count. So that's all I did." And I shrugged. She started giving me hateful looks while the managers told her that this position does need to report damaged fruit and packaging issues. At the end of the day, they moved me to another area, a much better one, where I now do quality too. And this woman can't help but glare at me every time she sees me. Wasn't I just doing what I was told? Just counting? Thanks for reading. Sorry if some parts aren't super clear. I'm still learning English. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Illuminatus Prime. It says, "Get a pic or poster of the count from Sesame Street and put it in your workspace. 1 damaged fruit, 2 damaged fruit, 3 damaged fruit. Ha ha ha." OP responded to this one and said, "What a wonderful idea." Another commenter down below called Arena Life said, "I need to know if you counted a fruit cut in half as 2 fruits or 1. I can't sleep now." OP responded and said, "I can't stop laughing at your comments. Answering your question, I always count them as 1. Haha." So OP saying that the robots fill the boxes and every once in a while the robots will break some of the fruit, and then OP says that a whole bunch of the fruit came through and they were all either split in half or busted or whatever, and the only thing I could think of at that point was, who loaded Fruit Ninja onto the computer that runs the robots? When the company axes voluntary time off but halts all production for maintenance, one worker decided to bill them for a 12-hour binge-watching marathon. This story comes to us from AnyPudding1541. No more VTO. So, long story short, my company got rid of voluntary time off last year. I have been with the company for 5 years and have always enjoyed going home early when there is no work to do. However, now we have to use PTO to go home early. I work 12-hour shifts and I love to get some extra sleep. Plus, my current financial situation is very unique and I don't need the extra hours. For the last 2 days, I have been unable to do anything at work because of a work-related maintenance. I can't do anything at all, but I have to use PTO to go home. I have directly brought this up to the person in charge of allowing VTO, and they said that there is always something to do. I can't do anything because of maintenance. Q. Malicious Compliance. I have been sitting in the break room watching shows for 2 shifts in a row now. I'm on the 4th season of Righteous Gemstones, and I've only just started watching it and have only seen it at work. Some people might think this is a dream to watch movies at work, but I would much rather be outside and get extra sleep than be stuck bored at work for 12 hours. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Attery Glitterwings. It says, "Time to build yourself a nap nook in the break room." Opie responded and said, "No joke, I took a 45-minute nap after eating an entire pizza earlier tonight." Another commenter down below called Attack Moose Gomer said, "I gotta be honest, if some company I'm working for pulled a stunt like that, I would thoroughly enjoy making a free paycheck off of them. I do understand the preference of being outside or resting at home, but free money is free money." Opie responded and said, "This happens all the time though, it's not once in a while." Does anybody else here feel like Opie should have showed up to work with their pajamas and their pillow and told them, "Hi, I'm ready to work today"? I remember in a few of the call centers I worked in that they offered VTO all the time when there weren't any calls in the queue, and frequently I would take it and go home, but then later on looking at my paycheck I'd be like, why the heck did I do that? When a Karen neighbor keeps filing complaints about their overgrown yard, one homeowner harnesses the power of nature itself for the perfect payback. This story comes to us from Tawny Fritz. "I had my yard certified as a national wildlife habitat to spite a busybody neighbor." Our yard is wild. I mean that in the real definition of living or growing in the natural environment. We have no lawn. We aggressively remove and prevent invasive and noxious species of plants and ensure that what grows is native to our area and drought resistant. The wildflowers that grow are things like lupine, blue flax, spiderwort, black-eyed Susan, and sunflowers, among others. We have natural elements like driftwood logs to retain water, and we even have an elk skull in the yard to act as a shelter for critters. There are a plethora of birds, bees, bunnies, and other wildlife. More wildlife than any yard in the area, as far as I can tell. It's beautiful and alive, but definitely not a manicured lawn with perfectly cut grass and landscaping. Last summer, we got a notice from the county that our yard was in violation of some county ordinance. My husband called the number on the notice and got a very over-it employee who let out a big sigh and said he had gotten like 30 complaints from one person for the entire strip of road that we live on. Keep in mind, you can't batch report an area. You have to file reports house by house. So someone had the time and energy to pull up Google Maps and file a report for about 30 houses for overgrown weeds. I checked the county ordinance and made sure everything we had in our yard was in compliance. Things like purposely cultivated, which our wildflowers definitely were. We planted specific species of seeds and we removed whatever's not native. None of the wild plants block any sidewalks, nor do they hang over onto any other properties. Now, knowing that it was someone with way too much time on their hands, I did some reading and learned that my yard has everything needed and then some to qualify as a national wildlife habitat. So I filled out the form, paid the fee, and got my certificate. My husband called the county employee back, who said, "Send me that certificate." He looked it over, thanked my husband for the new information he can use in the future, and closed our case. I now have signs on my yard that announce the property as a wildlife habitat, and the birds and bees get to keep living happily in the wild. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called DHGot. It says, "NPR ran a story years ago about a woman in Arizona who pulled up her grass and returned her yard to a native desert condition. She was told by the county to remove that trash and plant a green lawn. She took her fight to City Hall and eventually won." Another commenter down below called Asgardian Force User said, "Good for you, both the Malicious Compliance specifically and for maintaining a wildlife habitat in general. Those look better than any flat plot of grass any day of the week." I love this story. It sounds like something I should do with my own property because I absolutely despise cutting the lawn. I even looked into one of those robot lawnmowers, but my gosh, they're expensive. I'd have to sell a kidney just to afford one. If you enjoyed today's stories, I encourage you to follow us on your podcasting platform of choice. And if you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and please drop a like on the video. It tells YouTube we're doing a good job and pushes it out to more people. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.